Hey everyone, welcome to round 10 of the Instructors Roundtable. My name's Adam Mccann. Of course, I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's discussion. And thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us, whether you're joining us live or you're watching this afterwards. Today's a really special episode. We have a couple firsts taking place. This is the first time we're really stepping out of the tactical and operational realm and having an open discussion about something that's really more relevant to every officer and agency around the world. And moderator is also going to be the first time that we have a all-female instructor panel on. So I'm really excited for that. Before we get started, I want to let everybody know real quickly about the new network that we've rolled out. I know I kind of talked about it a bit during the ILET Summit, and I also brought it up throughout some emails and on social media. But we've finally launched the ILET Network. You can check it out at ilet.network. We'll put some links in the description here for you. But essentially, it's going to be an amalgamation of everything you've seen from us so far, from the podcast to the ILET Summit. All of the instructors, all of the organizations and companies that you're used to seeing with us are a part of this amazing collaboration. We're going to be covering training from every aspect of policing to security, corrections, emergency response, to the military, and much more. And of course, everything we do is going to have that component of charity, where we're going to be giving away the majority of the profits we make from everything that we do to go to help support mental health and resilience for officers and first responders. And depending on what we're going to be doing for the next upcoming events, we may have some NGOs involved as well. So the two events that I do want to bring up real quickly that are coming up that you can look forward to is on November 18th, we are running the National Emergency Responder Conference, and you can find that at nerconference.com. Again, we'll put the links in the description here. It's a one-day, completely free event. It is all about mental health and resiliency. So if you're a first responder, if you're in law enforcement, make sure to check that out, get your free ticket, and you can join and join us there for free. And then in January, we're going to be actually starting the International Summit on Counter Sex Trafficking. And that is one that I'm very excited about. We have Interpol involved. We have the RCMP, FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshals. We have some AUSAs. We even have the Director of Intelligence for Mexico coming on board to help share knowledge and information and to really help stem the tide of sex trafficking globally. So I hope you can join us for those. Again, all of that information can be found at ilet.network. Make sure to go and check that out and see what we're all about, see what we're doing. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. So with that being said, I want to introduce our panel of experts for this evening. So I'm going to pull myself off the screen here. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me on this IRT. It's a pleasure to have you all.
Happy to be here.
Hi.
So rather than having me go through and completely butchering your guys' expertise and your backgrounds, because you guys are such great experts at what you do, what I'd like to do is just give you a quick second to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and we'll kind of circle around like that. So Yael, why don't we start with you, and we'll
start
go from
with
there.
me. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Yael Bartour. I'm a social media consultant specializing in law enforcement in New York City. Up until earlier this year, I actually ran social media for the New York City Police Department. So quite a task. I was there for about 5.5 years and really started the social media program there. So that was super exciting. Definitely learned a lot there. Originally from Israel, born and raised there, and have been doing kind of government / military / law enforcement and communications pretty much my entire career. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Super excited to have you here. Amy, why don't you go ahead?
Hi. So my name's Amy Boudreau, and one of the police services that I'm an officer for the last 10 years. And one of my last roles that I was in for almost 4 years was crime prevention. And so we were subject matter experts who would run corporate social media accounts. And I also started up my own personal social media account to share knowledge and information. From there, with my personal account, because I'm involved with a lot of working groups within the industry at the provincial and Canadian level, I started posting and sharing social media and just like knowledge for those working groups as well. So I've been doing it since 2016 and always something to learn. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And yeah, you're the holdover member. You're one of the few that we've had that's been on a previous roundtable. So welcome back. Glad to have you back. And Lori, last but not least, of course.
Okay, so Lori Mccann. I've been a police officer for 22 years. I got into social media when I was a crime analyst back in 2012, I want to say. So I've been doing it for about 8 years. From there, I ended up speaking. It was a side gig when we started helping out with our corporate account before we had our other major corporate account, which now existed, didn't obviously when I started. Talked in schools for about 4 years. I've traveled nationally, internationally, speaking to officers, parents, teachers, educators, probation officers, you name it, on social media, all different types and levels of social media safety, cyberbullying, mental health, you name it. I've been doing that for approximately 8 years. So now I'm in a different role, but social media is always part of what I do in policing.
Awesome. Well, as you can tell, we have just an amazing amount of knowledge here for you to learn from. And one thing I do want to bring up before I completely forget is the majority of this panel has actually been part of or will be part of a special conference that's taking place in June of next year, which is called SmileCon or Smile Conference for social media, the internet, and law enforcement. So if you're not already familiar with that conference, if you're a PIO, if you're involved with anything to do with social media or communications within your agency, you got to check out SmileCon. If you go to smileconference.com, you can get more information. And there's a good chance that you'll see the majority of us at that event next year, provided that COVID doesn't shut everything down. So a little shout out to Lori Stevens, of course, with SmileCon. And just hopefully you guys will be able to check that out. All right. Where do we start? There's so many topics to talk about when we talk social media. What I'd like to do, I think, is, Gail, you and I kind of just had a little bit of back and forth prior to this, and I asked you if there was anything specifically you wanted to talk about that's relevant to officers or agencies right now. Why don't we start there, and then we can kind of just see where we go down the rabbit hole on everything. But I'll let you bring up that topic and explain it, and then we can open it up to the panel.
Sure. So I think what's relevant right now, especially in the U.S., I know we have a Canadian contingency here, but of course next week we have the elections in the U.S., and that's been kind of a tricky time for law enforcement. And I think a good time for us to remind law enforcement agencies that crisis communications is a huge part of managing a crisis. And we've seen agencies in very small towns that nobody has heard of really kind of hit the national spotlight, sometimes even international spotlight, and they weren't prepared to tell their own story. So I think it's a good time for every agency, even if they think the spotlight couldn't come to them or they have nothing to do with protests or with any type of incidents, to kind of really hunker down and create their emergency plan. And it doesn't have to be something too crazy or too detailed. It really starts with actually creating the social media accounts if you don't have them, or kind of digging up the keys. If you have them, but maybe you need to kind of brush the dust off of them. Making sure you have a streamlined communication so you know kind of who approves what and who has the information. And also making sure you have some templates in place and some graphics in place so that if something does happen in your community, you have to get out a message quickly, again, about a protest or about a shooting or about some type of violence where the whole eyes of the world are on you. You're able to do that, have as much of that prepared as possible. So I always try to plug the crisis communication aspect of social media because, nobody really here heard of Kenosha, Wisconsin, or Ferguson, Missouri before, they had major policing incidents there, and all of a sudden they were in the national spotlight. So you want to really make sure you're sharpening your communication so that if that happens to you, you're ready.
Absolutely. There's so many points there just in that short portion to start breaking down. So I think the number one thing that you were saying is that if, regardless of where you are in the world, whether you're in North America or elsewhere, if you don't already have a social media plan, we're in 2021 almost, you need to have one. And
Yeah.
you have to have one.
You might have a great social media presence and you might have a ton of followers and a great voice, but you need to have some kind of strategy and some kind of plan. Otherwise, you're just kind of, shooting tweets to the wind and then hoping for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the best place to let's start from the very beginning, because before we get into the intricacies of how and when and what we should be responding or putting out onto social media when these incidents occur, can we start from the beginning with an agency that maybe doesn't have anything set in place right now? Like where's the starting point? If you're talking to a small agency out there that doesn't have the resources of an NYPD, of a Calgary Police or Toronto Police Service, where do they start this whole process?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And if you don't have social media right now, or you don't know where to start, that's okay. There's always time to take the first step. And the good news is you don't need a ton. So you don't need money, you don't need a budget, you don't need a ton of people, you don't need a lot to start. So I actually recently wrote a blog post, and I'll share it here in the comments. That's just like 10 easy steps that you can take right now just to start. And some of that includes just opening up a Twitter account and opening up a Facebook page. And then also maybe identifying, in case of an emergency, who might be the people you would need to reach out to and have, their contact information in your phone. It could be as simple as creating a text message group with people or WhatsApp group and saying, hey, if there's an emergency, this is a group that needs to all touch base before we put out information. Creating templates. So if you're going to have street closures, you're going to have protests, you don't want to, at the time when you're pressed, to have to start coming up with that language. Maybe take this time right now to create these drafts so you have them. There's really a lot. I know it's very overwhelming, and social media is scary, and you're right to be scared of it if you are. But there are a few small, easy steps that you can take. And I'll put the blog in the comments link if I have access to that. We'll see. But if not, you can just go to my website, yaelbartour.com, and my blog, and see. And it's never too late to start. It's never too late to start. And if God forbid there's an emergency in your area, you're gonna, the bad news is you're going to get a lot of attention, but the good news is you're also going to get a lot of attention because, once you say something, it's going to carry far and wide because you're going to be the lead agency in wherever the crisis is happening.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
So Yael made a really good point. So if something is happening in your community, and it's kind of going off on a tangent a bit, but you want to be that agency that's on social media because everybody else is. And if you're not out there commenting on whatever that incident is, your community is going to make their own conclusions, and they're going to post that out there. And they could be the wrong conclusions and the wrong information and the wrong narrative. And if you don't direct that narrative through your own social media feeds, through your service, it could go horribly wrong. So it is very beneficial to have social media accounts. And like she said, it is overwhelming at first. And where do you start? But having a great base at the beginning, and the other comment that she made of a good back end, absolutely, whether it's a WhatsApp group, whether it's a Telegram group, whatever the case may be, you want to have a good back end so things aren't getting crossed over from other people posting and not realizing somebody else is doing the same thing with different messages.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are both great points. I'm just going to chime in quickly because I know you're talking about where do people start when they're going to create an account. So I feel like we're talking about two different accounts right now as well. So, I mean, essentially being online is a virtual social space to shape police brand. You have the, kind of to the point that you guys were mentioning, you have the capability to formulate that communication and what that looks like to the community. So there's two different types of accounts. So you can have your controlled accounts, which are more like corporate accounts. And then there's the personal account where individual officers will maybe create their own accounts. Again, so there's different agencies out there that want different things. So some allow personal accounts and others just want a corporate account because they want to control that message. So obviously you want to be mindful of whatever your agency's policies are. And, if they have things like not posting in uniform or other types of like policies and procedures, you want to make sure that you're following those. But there are studies that do show that some of the more personal accounts, so the informal, the more candid and immediate type of posts that allow officers that are out on the streets to know kind of who their community is and what they're interested in. That spontaneous type of like communication really builds up positive engagement. Not to say that controlled accounts or corporate accounts can't have that, but it's more controlled and it's more of an organizational communication undertone. Whereas the personal accounts sometimes can appeal to a certain population because it seems more authentic and credible. I know there are some services that, want personal accounts and have corporate accounts. I know, Lori, you've worked for a service that had both. I came from a service that had both, and then I've transitioned into another service that only allows corporate. So you really have to kind of, for those types of organizations, and you want to have both, but at the corporate level, there's an impression management, right? So making sure that they're upholding a certain image of what the public expects. Kind of conforming to more of a stereotype of like way of policing and showing that they're professional at all times. Whereas with the personal account, sometimes it can leave the organization feeling just like nervous about what the content can be put out there, because even when you control some of the content that goes out there, anything on social media is really hard to tame because you never know what type of comments or things that people are going to say. So essentially it's a risk adverse when an organization decides to open it up to allow their officers to post some of their own things. But I think what the important part of coming back to that would be training, making sure that officers who do have those personal accounts have the training necessary so that if there are mistakes that happen, that it can be corrected or prevented through the training aspect.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, to add on that, if one of your officers in their personal accounts makes a mistake or says something inappropriate, that's always going to reflect on your agency, whether or not they say, this is a private account or it doesn't reflect my agency. It doesn't really matter. So at the end of the day, even if you say to yourself, okay, these aren't official accounts, they can get away with a little more. Still know that the people online are going to view them as direct representations of your agency, which they are.
Yeah, definitely.
You have a good point there, because what I did teach a social media course that we had a 3-day course for many years. And we would tell our officers, even if you have a personal account, the moment you post a picture of yourself in your uniform, you are now, regardless that it's a personal account and you're not an ambassador for the service, it's your own personal account, you're now held to a higher standard. The public expects more from you. And that's usually where a lot of our complaints come in from the public, is usually from personal accounts, and they posted on there that they're police officers, and it gets them in hot water because they're making comments or posting inappropriate things.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing too is, in policing, whether you're on duty or off duty, you are always a police officer. So to your point, you are an extension of your organization, whether you're at work, on work, or if you're on social media. So those are definitely things to consider. And, the training, having training. So, if that's something that an agency is thinking about doing, or even an officer is considering to open an account, having some level of training is optimal. And if you are going to be on there, so that you know how to manage, crisis situations, or like a comment if something happens. If you have the basic knowledge, then you're going to feel more comfortable and confident to be on social media. And, the last thing you don't want officers to feel like is that they don't want to be on social media because they feel like it's risky, or, if I post something, it could, I could get in trouble or could get me in trouble because maybe I say the wrong thing and it gives off the wrong impression. So having those conversations before someone's on social media and giving them a knowledge base before they even create an account is going to give the officers the tools to be able to handle themselves on social media if they're in those types of situations. And one of the things I like that Lori and Scott Mills would talk about in their training was it's no different than, if you're out in the community and you're doing community policing, it's no difference online. It's like doing a digital foot patrol, just like you would walk the beat. And if you would engage and have conversations and communicate with people out on the street, it's the same idea. The only difference is that you're now online on this platform to have those conversations and engage with the community that way.
I think that's one of the really important portions of the whole social media game here is that when we talk about what's happening in policing right now, doesn't matter where you are, but especially in North America, that community outreach is, paramount. That's the name of the game right now is how do we bring the community back in and actually create those relationships. You have to go to where they're going to be, right? And I think we all understand that the vast majority of the population, and I don't know what percentage it is, but I'll make up a percentage and say like 98% of the population is on social media in some way, shape, or form. And if you don't have that as a way of outreach to them, then you're really going to miss the boat on that interaction and that relationship building. So where is a good start for an agency? Does it make sense then to develop a social media presence for the agency and training for the agency before you start allowing your officers to go out and create their own individual accounts, or can it be done in reverse?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, I think the number is 79% of American adults are on social media. I don't know why I know that, but definitely pretty high number and continues to grow every year. But I would definitely recommend starting with an official account just so you can set a tone and maintain, kind of I would call it NYPD. We opened over 200 accounts. So when I came in, there was kind of one voice coming out of one police plaza was the official voice. And then we decided to decentralize it and give every precinct in the city, given, it's a very large city geographically, every precinct in the city got their own social media account. And it was very important, obviously we did the training, we created the strategy, but I think the citywide account, we called it the main NYPD account is the one that's going to set the tone for everyone else. So you want to have that first, have that, kind of more thought out official voice, and then you can start experimenting with some of the decentralized accounts. That's how I would do it.
No, I agree, 100%.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is I've seen some agencies that started social media a little late, and what happened is their officers already started opening up social media accounts because that's what people do. So it's much harder to regain control over it once you have a lot of social media accounts out there, and it's better to kind of jump and start and have that official account first before your officers kind of beat you to it.
Yeah, and I would say probably having some form of procedure in place as well that kind of guides, has like a guideline almost, because some agencies will start up an account or even just like through their media relations, or they have a main account. But kind of to your point, some people might start opening up their own accounts because they're like, oh, we already have one here, but there is nothing in place. There's nothing written about just like the structure of what the expectations are.
Yeah, and so with our agency, you have to have the social media course prior to opening an account. So if you don't have it and we find your account, you're either told to close it or sent on the course.
Lori, I have a question for you. So there might be some agencies out there that they're not sure if they want personal accounts For whatever reasons, it could be the legal aspect. There's less liability if you have a corporate account. Plus, being in media relations, that there's consistent content that can be put out. There's copywriting laws or intellectual property laws when it comes to corporations, even just like music or images, or getting consent from minors if you're taking their photos from their parents. Trying to think what else. Anyway, I'm just wondering, so some agencies might think because of all of these reasons, we're not sure if we want to have private accounts.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to maybe some of those organizations who are considering maybe if they should do just the corporate, or maybe expand with, having other accounts? How would you get around some of those maybe concerns that agencies would have? And
I've always said this. Now, people, corporate accounts are great. They're great for pushing out major information, service information. But I can tell you from years of experience of being on social media, the public want to talk to a person, not a product. So the product being the police service, you're less apt. Some people don't want to walk into, for whatever reason, whether it's a stigma, whether it's fear, they don't want to walk into a police station, and whether it's a crime they want to report or they're victimized of something, you never know what it is. I've had many people reach out to me through my social media account, right from young kids to teenagers to adults, wanting to talk about something that's happened in their life. They won't do that with a corporate account. Is there risk? There's always going to be that risk when you're allowing people to have accounts. But if you have the proper training, I can tell you with our agency and the amount of officers we have on social media, which is upwards to, and I'm guessing right now, maybe 300, maybe a bit more, because you have some that come and go. We'll say an average of 300. The amount of people that have gotten themselves in major trouble are almost none. We have a few that have been dealt with. You have minor things like Yale mentioned of you know what, that's not really appropriate. Can you please remove that tweet? Because sometimes the tweet, it's not that the tweet's inappropriate, it's the timing. And you just ask them to remove it, they remove it in the end. So considering how many people are on social media, we don't have any major issues. So if they're trained properly, I think it's a great benefit to a service to have, whether it's and you got to look at, and I think Yale touched on this, who's going to be on social media? Is your crime prevention officers, your neighborhood officers, your community response officers, definitely your media officers. Figure out who you want to have on there, and if they've got the proper training, I think it would be beneficial for that service, because you're going to reach a wider range of people within your community if you do that.
I have an interesting topic I'd like to broach with you guys, because this is something that came up in the media. It came up on, I can't remember what it was, a post on LinkedIn or something. But essentially, an officer got fired because of a post their wife had made. So my question is at what point, and how in depth do you have to go with not only getting the officer's information, but saying, hey, with this current climate, you have to kind of have a talk with your family and say, like, some of the things that you post could negatively affect me or my department.
Yeah, so we actually do that in our training. We talk about, and Amy can vouch for this, officer safety, and you're only as safe as, your family members who you have on your accounts. So having that conversation with your family about safety as well, on all of their social media accounts, including your kids, right up to your spouse, to your parents, and so on. So I'm going to guess that person that was fired was in the US, because it's not that easy here to do that. But if you have that conversation with them, for them to see it, it's kind of like think outside the box, right? Because sometimes people just don't think that way. What you're posting is fine, but if your spouse's account is wide open and they're posting about you or making inappropriate comments, the world can see it, and that's going to relate back to you.
Yeah, I don't know the specific case, but we're definitely seeing people get in trouble for liking things, sharing things, even following. And a lot of times, officers are frustrated, and definitely understandable, because, they say, hey, it's our First Amendment right. We're allowed to express our speech on social media. And all that is true. But unfortunately, given the time that we're in, nobody wants to find themselves on the front page of the news for tweeting or posting something stupid. So I always encourage people, especially during these times, you have to understand that anything you put online, you have to be ready to read it tomorrow on the front page of the paper, and stand behind that. And, it's absolutely true that building on what you said, if you have one photo of yourself from 2 years ago in uniform on your profile, well, guess what? You're now, officially a member of this department online. And also, I'll even take it a step further. Even if you're not maybe identified as an officer, but you have different markers on your account, like you like certain cop pages or you're commenting on certain things, people still could call you out for that. So is that legally, a reason to terminate you? That's a different question, and it could not be. But still, it is definitely a reason for people to kind of call you out, put you on social media, get you in trouble. So you always have to ask yourself, is it worth it? And if I have political opinions or if I have opinions that are controversial, social media is just probably not the place to put them. It shouldn't be treated as a journal or, as the way, maybe some private citizens have the luxury of treating it. But once you're a police officer, you just unfortunately can't, you can't just post whatever you want out there without expecting, people to hold you accountable.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do we have to kind of make sure that officers know not to respond to certain posts or tweets that are made on social media, either about them, their agency, whether it's, F the police or, any of the 1,000 things that we see out there today? There's a lot of back and forth that I see a lot on social media, right? Where it seems to almost, it's being very divisive again. And one of the things that happened with the ILET summit, just so that everyone's aware, this was something that I dealt with personally, was when we had our International Law Enforcement Training Summit, we put out a bunch of advertisements everywhere saying, get your free ticket, because it was a free event. So we tried to get law enforcement from everywhere to attend. Now, obviously not every single ad went to a law enforcement officer. So there was some outliers. And those outliers, we would get messages back. So they would get the ad and then they would comment on the posts, and they would say things like, for example, if it was get a free ticket, the response would be, the only free ticket you're going to get is a speeding ticket. Or up into, which I thought was funny, up into things like, well, what are you teaching cops? How to kill people and get away with it, to, join the Gestapo, everything in between, New World Order, all these kind of things, to very, very negative ones that Facebook actually pulled off before I got the chance to read, believe it or not. So when those happened, what I did was I literally went into that account, I signed in, and as myself, and obviously now I'm not a sworn police officer, so I don't have a lot of boundaries there with what I can do. I jumped in and I directly messaged that person and I said, hey, listen, Karen, I understand that you obviously have some issues with law enforcement, and I'm sure they're completely founded, and I don't know what happened in your life, but I would love to invite you to personally attend the training. I would like you to actually attend, ask questions of the instructors, because 99% of the stuff we teach police officers is public knowledge. We're not taking people down to the basement and showing them a bunch of secret stuff and then saying, don't tell anybody about it. And so I was really trying to bridge that gap and saying, we want you as a community to see what we're training and what we're doing so that you can at least have a base knowledge. And it's not just like what you're seeing on social media right now from all of these leftist channels. You're actually getting the real information. And when I did that, a vast majority of them either said, okay, thank you, I will. I don't think really many of them did, but it stopped kind of that thread. Now, of course, there were the trolls, in which case you would just kind of just block them off and move away. But it really helps to directly engage that person. Now, my question is that something that we should be training people running these social media accounts to do? Or is that kind of a very high liability interaction that we may say that maybe not be a good idea for an agency to do directly?
I'll go first if that's okay. So we would always say in the training that you can give one obviously proper corporate answer to somebody if they're calling you out or bringing up a comment, regardless of the situation. And that has happened to me, and I gave a polite corporate answer, and then my followers jumped in and attacked him. So I just sat back and watched. And that's okay if that happens. But you don't want the back and forth. Like you commented, Adam, you don't want to have the back and forth with these people because that's what they want. They want you to feed into that and feed into their world. You give them the one answer and you leave it at that. From a corporate account, they can still do the same thing. With direct messaging, I think that's brilliant that you did that. Do that, obviously, as an officer with your own work account. Be very careful, I would say, with direct messages because those can be screen grabbed and shared. So if you're going to do that, just make sure what you put in there is appropriate because it could be shared publicly. And a lot of times people do that. They'll take your message and share it publicly. So just with that in mind. But I think, yes, absolutely. I think if you're doing it properly, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I agree with Lori's point with, occasionally, depending on what the comments are, responding like neutrally once. And if they keep trying to rope you in, then you kind of just cease communication. There have been times, though, where especially trolls or people, it doesn't matter what you say, it's always going to be negative and turn into some type of argument. So in those cases, if there's comments, sometimes I just won't comment at all. But I don't block or delete anything unless it's like hurtful, hate like type of messages, because people are entitled to their own opinion, even if it's you don't agree with it or it's offensive, like you're offended by maybe what the comment is. But as long as it's not like hate messages and stuff like that, then I'll typically just leave it. There have been times where I've had to block somebody only one time, and I've been on social media for a really long time, where comments were being made that seemed like a safety risk. So in that case, I put on a general report and just blocked the person, just indicating kind of what was said. And then, if somebody reaches out, in that manner, then you would still treat it as if, someone walked into the police station and said the same thing to your face, right? So you just have to be mindful of just following practices as well. As an example, if somebody's even commenting about wanting to harm themselves or somebody else, then you would act as a police officer and you would notify your supervisor if you were working, or if you were off work, you would contact somebody about that to deal with it.
I'd love to jump into the conversation about what we're doing with these social media accounts. What does that outreach look like? Like, what are we using these accounts for? Right? Like, what are they useful for? What are they good at? What are they not good at? And then on the flip side of that, when we're getting contacted through these platforms, like Amy had just said, what kind of communications are we getting? Are people actually reaching out because of an emergency and things like that? And I know Amy and I have had this discussion before. I think we even talked about it on ILET, was what do officers have? Like, one of the things that I know you do on your account is like, this is not an emergency line. Like, if there's an issue, like, contact 911, because sometimes people don't realize that, right? They think I have a direct line to an officer, I'm going to contact them with an issue, and maybe not realizing that account isn't monitored 24/7 or whatever it is. So first things first, why do we reach out? What do we do with our accounts to reach out to the community? And what I'm going to actually do here is I'm just going to share my screen real quick. I have that. I have a social media guidebook that came out not too long ago, and it's kind of interesting. And I kind of wanted to share this with everybody. And I don't know if I can make this bigger. I'll see if I can. There we go. And I'll just pull myself off the screen here so everybody can see that. So essentially, this was done in 2016. So it was saying uses of social media. And I think it was over 500 agencies in the United States. And so it's obviously, it says, so 91% of the agencies used it to notify the public of safety concerns, 89% for community outreach engagement, and then public relations, notifying them of non-crime issues like traffic. So where traffic's down or maybe there's construction, things like that, soliciting tips on crime, monitoring public sentiment, intelligence gathering for investigations, recruitment, communications with other government agencies, and in-service training and other. So what I'll do is I'm going to pose this to all of you is, where do you see social media being the most effective for agencies, and maybe which ones of these they should, put on the back burner?
Community outreach and engagement is up there, and public relations. And I think that comes into play for the community engagement is the individual accounts. It's hard to kind of do that with a corporate account. Can you do it? Yes, but it's a lot easier to do it with individual accounts and individual officers. I've had people reach out to me in regards during COVID to the protests that we have in our division and express their frustrations, and they are so grateful that I get back to them. It's a simple message, and they are grateful that somebody's listening, right, in law enforcement. I've had people reach out that are suicidal, absolutely, and on Amy's point, I contact the right police service if it's not ours and help them. I've had people reach out because I'm a runner, and we haven't touched on this yet, Adam, but of how much of your personal do you put into your work account? Whenever you want to touch on that, I'll bring it back up. But people reach out to me that want to get on the job and ask for fitness tips, right? Simple stuff like that. So I think that community engagement, because if I can do that from behind a desk, the officers on the road can do that tenfold.
Anybody?
I think one thing that I guess it fits into community outreach and engagement, but a big part I think is to humanize policing and to show that there are people behind these badges, and that can be done from a corporate account, it can be done from a private account, but anytime where you remind people of the men and women behind these uniforms, I think it's a huge win for law enforcement that is currently seen as this one big kind of faceless, nameless entity. And we see it around the country too, as if there's an incident, a police involved shooting in Philadelphia or in Minnesota, it affects their protests throughout the country, because they tend to see policing as kind of one faceless entity. So anytime we can humanize our officers, show the people behind the badge, show what they do, not just the heroic stuff. Obviously that stuff's great, but even, the personal stuff, like, the person who's a runner, or the person who's, got their master's degree in literature, or just showing kind of the different facets and different faces of the police. And the other thing I want to touch on, which you mentioned, what is this not good for? I think it's very, very important to listen on social media, but you also have to understand that you're never going to get a accurate representation of your community, because social media is very self-selective, and the people that post on it are, there's a huge self-selection there. And when you post something, you might get 1,000 views and only, 2 or even 100 comments. It's still, nothing compared to these 1,000 views. So you always have to take what you hear on social media with a grain of salt. Definitely listen to it and act on it if you think it's necessary, but don't mistake it for putting your finger on the pulse of your community. Because sometimes you'll see, and we see it a lot here in New York, where people on social media will complain about one thing, and the people that come to the meetings will complain about the exact opposite of that. So it's just important to understand that, it's not necessarily a good reflection of your entire community.
Yeah, those are all really good points. Just touching on what both of you have kind of mentioned, that engagement portion on social media, reaching out into the community, that outreach, that's what's really building the trust and respect with the community, because they're getting to know you, to Yale's point, behind the badge, like humanizing the badge. When you build the trust and respect, that's when you're breaking down the barriers between, what the community thinking that police and the community are separate. Like, police are the community and the community are the police. And the idea of engagement is having everybody at the table to have meaningful conversations about how they want their community to be policed, and to have those partnerships and relationships, and building those partnerships with businesses, citizens, politicians that are there, like everybody in the community working together for a shared cause, which is to reduce crime and make sure everyone feels safe, right? And they're working together. So that partnership, social media is a way to support each other that way. And then the other aspect of, and to Lori's point, what she was saying about, showing a bit of your human side. So if I like yoga and I'm posting, things about health and wellness and what I do in my off time as it relates to my job, or if Lori's posting about that she enjoys running, now, that comes back down to recruitment, in the sense of now somebody can see themselves in your role because they can relate to you on a human level, where, I didn't think that maybe I could do something, but that person has the same interest as me. So maybe this is something, that I can get along with this person, or do this similar work. So it's great for recruiting that way. But the other part of engagement too is not just like on social media to engage with the community, but the social media platform itself, and what does that engagement look like? So I can be posting all day, but if my followers are not engaged, so they're not liking my stuff, they're not resharing, or they're not making comments, well, am I getting the full maximum potential of what I could? So the idea with what we're talking about having a strategy or a plan, is having content for your posts that are really going to not only just show pictures or videos or images of stuff that you're doing, but also having that level of engagement where you're communicating with people on those platforms.
Brilliant.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I agree. I just want to touch on that, because what Yael said was like bang on with the humanizing the badge. That's key, because it's true. People in life forget before social media that sometimes people just see the uniform, they don't see the person behind it. So you can humanize that online if you do it the right way. And with what Amy said, engagement is key. You can't just go out there and post selfies of yourself in uniform and, hey, I'm doing traffic control. Hey, I'm doing this. That's not engagement with your community. It's posting things that are going to elicit conversation with your community, good or bad. You want to hear what they have to say, because you're going to improve by their input on what's going on in their community and your community.
Yeah, and to that point, I would say, though, like so usually the more successful posts, let's say, so the ones that actually invoke engagement on the post, is something that's educational. You're communicating something of value to your community. Something that's, a little bit entertaining too, because obviously people are human, and if you have a little humor in there, then that also works. And again, thinking outside the box, not always something that's going to catch your audience's attention, so that you're able to spread the message, and it's able to go a lot further, because that's the goal too, is you really want to have that outreach to get that message across, whether it's crime prevention, safety related information, whether it's updates, whether it's, whatever it is that your message, and you want to use that platform to share, to have positive influence, with the greater good in mind. You want to have something that's going to help, inspire other people as well to engage with their community as well. So yeah.
I can think of a few examples. You guys, the one that always pops to the top of my head, and obviously Lori and Amy, you guys know him, is Randall Arsenault. Because when you talk about having that sense of humor, but also education and explaining what's going on, and then community interaction, when I see his posts, that's exactly what I see. Like, he kind of blends everything together, and really has done very successfully, created this community around his posts. And obviously, I mean, he does a lot for the Aboriginal community, but also for Canadian policing in general. I think he's well known pretty much across the country, and then also in the United States as well. A lot of officers mimic their social media accounts off of what he's doing because he's so successful with it. What is it that he's doing that is so different than what we're seeing with some of these other accounts?
I think and I know Randy, we're friends, and love him or hate him, what he does, he engages with his community. The community love him. He reaches youth. So if you look at the stuff he does, he's huge on TikTok. He was known as the Instagram cop. And I know one of the officers that had to work with him once, he goes, it was unbelievable. It was like he was this famous guy walking down, he was working the Santa Claus parade with him, and it was unbelievable. Everyone that stopped him, hey, you're the Instagram cop. And it's like he's a big name, like you said, worldwide, people know him. So whether you're an officer and you agree or don't agree with everything he does, he puts out posts that sometimes you go, well, why would he do that? The community loves it. And then his next post will be educational. He'll throw in a tip about, hey, this is what policing's about. And he'll post things about, our canine unit or our Marine unit, or he'll post, hey, this is why we have this on our belt. And he'll talk about safety, and he talks about traffic stops, but he throws in that human part of it. He does funny stuff. I find myself laughing at some of his stuff because I'm like, on TikTok, my kids are like, you know him? Like, he's a big deal. I'm like, yes, I'll see if you can do a TikTok with him, okay? So it's like, for the fact that everybody knows who he is, he's doing something right. And I think what it is he reaches those communities around him and around the world, really. They can relate to him.
The sooner agencies become more comfortable with this type of stuff, the sooner they can embrace it and get the good part out of it and kind of minimize the negative, because there's a lot of police officers with these kind of accounts out there. Most of them are good, some of them are not. And I think the more we can embrace the one like Randy and some others, and kind of make sure that they're the ones that are being put out there and embraced and showing the good side, the better it is for law enforcement, because they really do a service. And I've seen sometimes instances where it's been a bit of a conflict because they might be violating policy, but you always have to measure that policy versus with how much positive influence does this have on the agency itself, and not kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, just to that point, I want to ask you, so obviously working with such a large organization, there's all sorts of different levels of officers with time on. And sometimes, you've got the officers who, are super into social media and other types of innovative ways of doing things and kind of put themselves out there. And then there's other officers who may have the concept of, well, we shouldn't be on social media. We never were on it before. It's all ridiculous. Go out there and make arrests and stop posting on Instagram. Like, what would you say to those officers?
And I've definitely seen a lot of those. And I like to take pride in the fact that some of our best social media accounts are run by people who hadn't done it before, but they were open to it. So I think what I do is I would provide a training for executives or anybody really who's getting some kind of promotional rank, and I call it my scary training. And it's a training where I tell them, look, this is how exposed you are. This is how big social media is. You don't even need to be on social media to become, a social media legend, for better or worse. And the only way to affect this is to put our own stuff out there. So as long as we're not there, other people are still talking about us and other people are telling a story for us. And as long as we're not out there and not contributing, then our narrative is being shaped by someone else. And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. So not only do they need to understand why we're doing it, but they also need to contribute. And the other thing I tell them is you don't have to like it. So not everybody is the kind of guy who wants to be in photos and wants to make TikTok videos, and that's completely fine. But you need to understand the importance of it. And as long as you can do the positive stuff while maintaining the professional aspect and the respect of police officers, then I think it's a win-win. And it comes down to building that trust with the community. And no officer can deny right now that it's a very uncomfortable time for law enforcement in terms of public opinion. There's a huge breach in trust, and a lot of it is stemming from social media. And if we can do something or put something out there on social media that makes people look at the police department a little differently, or makes people remember that, you know, these people are human, maybe even if it's a little silly or a little, you know, funny, then that's a good day for us, a day that we can remind people that we are human beings.
Love it. I need to bottle you up, Yale, and just everything you're saying. You know, when the board.
Hey, listen, I'm open to international travel, so.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah, don't go up. You're gonna have to quarantine for 14 days and some type of.
Oh, wait, okay, I'm coming from New York, so they probably wouldn't let me in anyway.
Yeah,
we'll bring you in.
I was gonna say too, you know, I think it's important that, you know, back to this humanizing the badges, to share your story, right? Like, not be afraid to be yourself and kind of put yourself out there, because we need, you know, to Yale's point, we need officers that are willing to put themselves out there to help, you know, brand the image of policing, because the narrative has been negative. And I think the mistake that a lot of agencies made early on was that we weren't on social media, or we weren't in the media to tell our side of the story. And, you know, and I get during certain investigations, there's times where you can't talk, you know, about certain details. However, if there's a narrative that's out there, you know, and someone else is telling it, you know, whether it's through media or, you know, pieces of YouTube videos that maybe don't show the full story, but, you know, as officers, we're not saying, well, no, this is, you know, not the case. This is what I can tell you. When we don't do that, then, you know, society will then think that the silence must mean acceptance, so it must be true. Meanwhile, some of the narratives are not true, right? So I think it is important to have officers willing to put themselves out there and to do this kind of work in order for those narratives to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we jump into the next topic here, Yale, I know you have to take off. You had some other stuff pre-planned, and thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here.
Great speaking to everyone, and good speaking to you ladies. And hopefully we can see each other in person soon.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to check out Yale's stuff, the link is going to be in the comments there. There's the link to her blog post there at yalebartour.com. Yale, is there any last minute things that you want to share with the audience before you take off?
Just to, first of all, everybody be safe. And I guess if I had to like part with words of wisdom, just to remind everyone that social media is not real life. I know it's a very tough time for law enforcement right now, and for everyone, but every time you open social media, it seems like the whole world is kind of crashing down and tumbling on you. And there's a lot of criticism out there, and a lot of anger and hate. And it's just important to take a step back and, remind yourself that you're seeing something that's been pre-selected for you. And it doesn't necessarily reflect the public opinion, which I think for the most part, respects law enforcement and just wants everybody to be safe and get along. So try not to get too impacted by that negativity you see online.
Awesome. Great points. Thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to talking to you very soon. We're going to have some collaborations coming down the pipe. So I'm excited.
Sounds good. Take care, everyone.
See you. All right.
So she brought up a really good point. With the
center myself.
Oh wait, yeah, hang on a second.
I was like,
there you go.
It's not working. So she brought up a really good point, and it made me think of one post that I had. I posted something, and it was nothing. Well, it was about an officer that was killed in the line of duty, like 25 years ago. And I posted something about the guy that had shot him, and his opportunity for parole came up, and it was a very, nothing wrong with the post, but they went off on me and saying they knew somebody that he was in jail with him, and went on and on and on. And I basically answered him, and the first response I got was, first, I want to thank you for answering my condescending questions. And he actually DM'd me later and gave me like full respect for responding to him. And I did it in a very corporate and polite way, but I did respond to him because his narrative was wrong, and he needed to know what he was saying was not correct. And I had to, but you have to answer it not in a way that you would on maybe a personal lockdown account with a different name. You have to answer it in a way that, hey, I'm reflecting my service here when I respond to this person, and it's a public forum, but I still got my point across. And he respected me for it, even though he was very nasty at the beginning. Mm. So I think it's key, like about the narrative, right? So if I didn't respond to him, that narrative would have continued on with what he was saying, and he was wrong. Mm-hmm. Not saying respond to everything. Don't respond to everything out there, but some things need an answer.
I think that's fairly common, though. The misinformation is fairly common.
Yeah.
Well, even just look at text messages through text or posts. It gets lost in translation. You know, your tone or might be a certain way, but someone might perceive it differently. So another thing that you always want to consider too, and this is, Lori, and this is something you know as well, because we talk about it when you're with cyberbullying and stuff like that, is it's not how you intended it to be or what you meant, it's how it's perceived. Yeah. So you gotta take the big picture in mind too, and just say, will this offend certain people, or am I using proper language, when I'm trying to communicate a message? Because sometimes you could say something, but someone thinks it means something else. So again, just being mindful of the words that you choose and how you communicate that. And then to your point, Lori, if there is a miscommunication, then just correcting somebody on what it is.
Agreed.
There was a question that came up here, so I'm going to post it up on the screen so everybody can see it. But he basically, from Alex, he said, for a sheriff's office who isn't very active, how does someone in corrections try and boost activity? The patrol division isn't really doing much. So I'm assuming they're either in the jail or they're in a static location. And then the second part was, I can't, of course, get out to the community like patrol can. So I guess for Alex, I think there's an advantage to social media with this, because even though he's not out on patrol, he's able to still get that interaction. So what would you guys say to him?
Well, I'm trying to figure out if he's in corrections. There's not a lot you can post about people that are in jail. Obviously, there's privacy issues there. But talking about safety issues or consequences to crime, engaging with your community. Hey, do you understand, what does it mean when you get parole? Or what does it mean when you get an absolute discharge, right? So you could maybe engage your community that way and clarify things, because we know this terminology, a lot of the public don't know it. So if you do that educational, even a quick little, 1 minute video on, I'm not a video person, but as you can see, there's many officers out there that are. So if that's your niche, do a quick little video or do a static photo of something with some stats, with some information, explain the process, how it works in jail, how it works, what does it mean when you are guilty? What does it mean when you plead not guilty, but with conditions? Maybe kind of educate the public on that, and then add a bit of your own personality in there so these people get to know you. So if someone has an issue with maybe a loved one that's in jail, they're going to reach out to Alex, as opposed to, I'm not going to ask anybody because I don't know who to reach out to.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, Alex, let us know if that answered your question, or if you have any follow-up questions. I think that's a great point. It reminded me, I did a presentation way back in the day. It was on, we were doing a joint thing for loss prevention and the police service. And I was giving a presentation to the police service. And at the end of it, for some reason, I guess I thought it was funny at the time, but there was an old meme that went around, and I think it was in every single security and LPO office that I've ever been in. And it's basically like, this is your butthole and this is your butthole in prison. And that is an example of something that's not appropriate to send out on your social media account.
Yeah. I think both Amy and I would say 100% that's not appropriate.
Yeah, no.
It's the only thing that jumped out at me as soon as Alex made his comment there. So
just to Alex's question again, and so I know Lori was mentioning about more of like the educational processes and stuff, which is amazing because a lot of people don't know that. Another thing that you could do too is when you're networking with other officers or like security, law enforcement, military, like within your like community, public safety community, even just showing partnerships and the work that they do together as well. Because social media can be a tool to even just network with like-minded individuals and within your own industry. I mean, Lori and we met. If it wasn't for social media, we wouldn't have met and be friends. So I've met so many different, same with Adam, you too, just being on social media and networking online, there's a ton of opportunities to meet people that are in your industry as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Amy, the way I connected with you first was through social media.
LinkedIn, I think.
Yeah, I think so. LinkedIn, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole for a quick second. If you're in any type of profession and you're not on LinkedIn right now, I don't know what you're doing with your life. But for me, for example, like I don't use, and I probably could be a lot better, especially with the podcast and with everything. We have accounts on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, but I found that LinkedIn is really the best platform, especially to have legitimate discussions. And for me, especially acting almost solely in the law enforcement, first responder, military space, it also has something that you're not really able to do on other platforms, which is vet the person you're talking to or connecting with before you actually connect with them. And that's kind of an interesting piece that I found very useful. So if I was reaching out and say, for example, we're going to be running a show, for example, we have the summit coming up on counter sex trafficking. I can go into LinkedIn and I can actually search for people that specialize in counter sex trafficking that are in law enforcement, maybe in a specific country or hold a specific position. Maybe I only want to reach out to trainers. Maybe I only want to reach out to chiefs or assistant chiefs. Maybe I want to reach out to patrol officers, but you can kind of separate that in the LinkedIn search and really hone in on the people you want to connect with. So for me, I find it very, very useful. And so I always tell everybody, if you're not already on there and you're in this community right now, it's a great place to be to really get more contacts.
And to your point, Adam, I would say that each platform, like each social media platform, has its own demographic. So if you as an officer, if you're trying to reach a certain like age or like particular demographic in your community, it's good to be on many accounts. There's a younger generation on TikTok. There's the Snapchat. I don't really do Snapchat for police, but Twitter. So some of the content I post on Twitter and my Instagram are different. And then the LinkedIn as well. So there's a ton of different platforms. I know there's YouTube as well, that a lot of agencies will use to post video content or information to the community, but it's good to have multiple platforms so you can pick and choose. I know some are on Facebook as well. So figure out maybe who's in your community and don't close off opportunities by only choosing one. Try to have a few different accounts if you can, but again, you want that engagement piece. So if you're unable to manage multiple accounts, then then kind of narrow it down.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. You can almost select your demographic based off the platform you're on, which is interesting. So if you want to, I mean, we could talk about it briefly here for everybody about what platforms you could go on to for certain demographics. But there was Alex kind of had a follow-up question here, and I think we can touch on this first before we move on. And his question was, how about trying to engage to the kids to trust the police? So again, this is kind of going back to what Lord said about what Randy is doing. I know a lot of the stuff that he does on TikTok gets hundreds of thousands of views, close to 1 million views. And it's all that 14 to 20 demographic. I think that's fantastic. But I mean, that's a very specific platform. And if you're not predisposed to doing that type of content, that's almost a daunting task for somebody. That's like taking somebody who just learned to walk and saying, like, here, go climb Mount Everest. TikTok's a whole nother beast. So when it comes to engaging children and kids, what's the best way to do that, do you guys think?
Well, you get the odd younger teen, I guess you could say, on Twitter. There's not a lot. There's some kids, but there's not a lot of kids on there. Instagram's kind of for everybody. So you have the young, right from, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to the older, and businesses and everything in between, plus agencies and you name it. So I think that for me, and Amy, you can jump in, but Instagram is the catch-all for any age group. TikTok is for, you get a multitude of ages on there, but mostly the younger group there. But like you said, TikTok's a whole other beast. I'm not prepared to do that at any point in my career right now. And not a lot of officers are, right? You do have some out there that will use it, but not a lot. So I would say Instagram. So I don't know if Alex has an Instagram account. I know he was talking about, I guess he runs one for the sheriff's office as well. So we can talk offline if he wants at some point to help guide him with what he's looking for. But Twitter's not the place for young kids because you're not going to get that many on there. Instagram, for me, is where you're going to get the young kids.
I'm just going to share my screen here for a second. I'm just pulling up a research page that has, not that one, information on this. So just give me 2 seconds while I do that. So essentially, this is showing. So this is in the U.S. So obviously, it's always hard to get data samples that are international. So usually, it's more regional. But we'll use the U.S. because it's the larger sample size. But it shows you here. So it has all the different types: Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube, WhatsApp, Reddit. So obviously, this one doesn't even have. What were we just talking about there?
TikTok.
TikTok. Yeah, see, that's how much I use it. Here's the big.
Social media is always changing, though. It's hard to keep up with all the changes.
Here's the number one thing that I think is the most relevant, though. If you look at this, is if you look at Facebook, it's kind of the outlier in that the vast majority of people on Facebook are over 50.
Yeah.
And that's a big shift, right? Because Facebook, if you look at Facebook 15 years ago, even, it was a lot of high school, university age. And now it's completely the opposite side of things. So, and it looks like the rest of the platforms are pretty well scaled, relatively close to each other. But Facebook is kind of that outlier in that it has a very more mature audience. So if you're looking to engage with children, Facebook isn't going to be your best option.
No, my kids call it's for old people like me. Whatever. But that's what they say. And they're not on it, nor will they be anytime soon on Facebook, that is. So I'm a firm believer Instagram is where you're going to reach the kids.
Mm-hmm. Can we briefly talk about platforms that we need to avoid? I think there's a few out there that people don't understand why the platform was developed or parts of it. I don't want to get into the conversation of whether or not TikTok is controlled by the Chinese government and all that kind of stuff. That's not what I want to get into. But for just what's on the platform, what the platform was designed for, and what information people are pulling off of it, there are certain platforms that, from a law enforcement perspective, we should be avoiding for our own personal accounts. Does anybody want to take that one?
I think one of the ones that people have to be careful with are obviously the free dating sites and then posting themselves in uniform. Don't ever do that. Right? I get it that it's, but it happens. Right? But for law enforcement, like we have set accounts that or platforms, I should say, that officers are authorized to use. And that they can go out and post on. Going outside of the realm, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's many apps out there that are, you kind of iffy. But if you're going to go on there as an officer and representing your service, you got to be really careful, knowing your audience and what platform that you're using. So if it's not an authorized one by your service, I would be very leery of using it. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Like Snapchat, to me, it doesn't work. Not for law enforcement and not to engage your community. Snapchat's not one to use. And I think, Amy, you agree with that? It's just not a platform that really resonates.
No, and it's not, because it's just more direct messaging. And, even though there's a direct messaging feature on some of the other social media platforms, you're going to burn yourself out. Honestly, if you're doing these one-on-one conversations all the time, like, you can do your best to manage, comments that come through. But if you had a social media site like Snapchat that's mostly back and forth one-on-one, then yeah. I mean, I'm not on Snapchat for work, anything like policing related. I use Twitter, Instagram. I know Facebook, people use Facebook, YouTube. I don't, I know there was like a house party app that some younger people were using, but it's more so for videoing. Again, that's more like it's like a friend platform where you're talking with your friends. So again, it doesn't really work for law enforcement or like policing agencies. Again, you want to be able to have post pictures and video content. So use platforms that you can have that opportunity to engage the shared messages and comments. Some of those other platforms they don't really cater to what we're looking for those. Another thing for Snapchat too, which is in policing too, you want to, because of the Freedom of Information Act, so you're not supposed to really delete or remove anything. And I know for Snapchat, there's, comments that are deleted and stuff like that through messaging, even though Snapchat actually keeps them on record for a minimum of 7 years. But again, the platform isn't really set up to engage properly as a policing organization.
That's an interesting point. And I know we're not really going to dive into investigations, but I think it's important to know, because a lot of people think when things are on Snapchat or something like that, or it's an instant message app and it deletes, it's gone. It's not. And so for an investigations purpose, I think that's important to note that if you don't already know that, you can actually go through the process of getting those records, even though the person may believe they're deleted. In reality, there's still a record of them. Yeah.
And I mean, Snapchat used to fully be just you send a message or a photo and it deletes. You now have the option of saving it into your camera roll. You can save the messages as well as the photos, as well as the videos, and save all of that into your camera roll, as well as saving it on the app. Now understand the difference. If it's on your camera roll, and in a policing perspective, I know we're not going to get fully into investigations, and that's not my realm, but you need a warrant for that phone. That's going to be on the phone. But if they're saving it onto their Snapchat, into their memories on their Snapchat, then you need to either get a production order or an MLAT, because when you get a warrant for somebody's phone, it'll tell you what apps they have, but you're not getting anything from the apps. So I think that's important for officers to understand. When you do that, it will not give you any information that what has occurred on those apps. And know where the server is housed, because something like Tell on Me, which is an anonymous app, is housed in Berlin. Good luck getting information. It's going to take you a long time, right? You'll get it, but it might be a year and a half, maybe longer. So understanding where those, and that's a whole other conversation, but just know the key thing is when you're getting information off a phone, you're getting nothing from the app other than that they've downloaded it.
Well, another point to investigations, it's good to be on multiple platforms so that you know how the app actually functions and works. Because if you are looking to get investigative information, then you know where to find it on the platform, and you have access to it. If you're not on social media, then how do you gain access to it, right? So that's important. I know we'll get into investigations a little bit later on. But I just wanted to kind of bring up, because I know we were talking about what to post, what not to post on some of these platforms. So there's a couple of points that I have here that I kind of wanted to make sure that people knew what to post, what not to post. And Laura, you can chime in too with some of the comments if you want to add anything. So you don't want to post offensive material. You don't want to post anything that's confidential information. So anything about operations or how you do things at work. A lot of agencies want to keep that private because you don't want to ruin your investigative, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Advantage to how you operate in your investigations. Identifying information. So if you're going to be posting, obviously you want to keep your safety in mind. So don't be posting like license plates, addresses. Check in your photos if you're going to be posting that there's nothing confidential or sensitive in the background of your photos. You want to make sure that you're not stealing intellectual property. So if you're actually using content from somebody else, you want to give them the credit or explain like where you got it from or tag the person if you're like doing a repost or something. Again, I mentioned like don't delete any content unless it's hateful or hurtful, it's belligerent. Again, you would just treat that the same way that you would if someone was being bullied. You would take a screenshot of the image or what was being said, report that account to the social media sites to get it removed, and then you would block that account if it had to get to that. You don't want to endorse certain companies, especially as officers. Like, oh, go buy this product, or you're trying to promote something and you're in uniform, that will get you into trouble. So again, just remember, because you do have influence as a police officer. So you want to make sure that you're not showing favoritism for certain type of companies or anything like that. During political campaigns, just be mindful of the same thing. Don't be taking pictures with political people. So, that can anything to do with politics that way, especially in the US, there's elections coming up and stuff like that. So just be mindful when there's an election year. Doesn't mean that, council, city councils and stuff, they're usually involved with like crime prevention aspects and stuff like that. But when it's around election time, just be mindful of those tensions or the optics of what people might think it looks like. Again, we talked about being on duty or off duty. You're still representing your organization. So always be mindful of the stuff that you're deciding to post. The opinions that you are writing about are your own. It's not your organization's, but as soon as you are wearing that uniform, or if you're saying you work for a certain police service, then you are bound by those same legalities. And then, don't post about a major news event or make comments about something. If I've had times where people like news media will reach out to me and ask me for a comment, I just redirect them to media relations if they have specific questions about something. It's only happened a couple of times, but if you're not trained as a media officer to answer those types of questions, leave it to that particular unit. And one of the points that Lori had made in her social media training courses, they always talk about staying in your lane. If someone's asking you something and you don't have an answer, don't make it up. Stay in your lane. Like, there's only, you're not going to be an expert at everything. If you don't have an answer for somebody, be honest and tell them, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the actual answer is at this point, but I'll get back to you when I do have the answer, and then follow up with them, or just post things that you have a knowledge base about, where you can engage with your audience because you already have the knowledge. Laura, do you want to add anything to the don'ts?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we made several good points. So if you don't have the knowledge, like if say if it's a traffic question, don't ask me the traffic stuff because I probably won't know the answer. Then I will tag. I know we have traffic officers. I will tag them and say, hey, so and so, do you know the answer to this question? If you don't have traffic officers on social media, then say, yeah, I'll get back to you. The media one is a huge one. I have a lot of media that follows me. I've had them reach out several times about cases I know nothing about. And even if I did, it's not my role to do that. It is our corporate communications role to speak to them. So you always go to them first. They may say to you, no problem, you can respond to them, or direct them to us. And half the time they know if they go through corporate communications, they're not getting an answer. Hence why they'll become your best friend on social media and send you direct messages. And they would easily quote you or misquote you, screen grab what you said and post it. So we never ever respond. That is key when it comes to media reaching out to individual officers. Make sure that you go to your corporate communications first, or you could get yourself in a lot of hot water.
It's funny you say that. I remember now when every time we did a domestic exercise or anything where we'd be involved with the community, this was the Canadian Forces, we had media cards. And so every single soldier, we'd go out at the beginning of the exercise, hand them all a media card. And it basically said, if you're approached by the media, here's what you do. And it's basically you never say no comment. And all you do is direct them to the media relations officer or to your commanding officer or to your sergeant. Basically, just send them up the chain up until they get to the person they need to talk to. That's not you, because you're not supposed to answer any questions. But it's kind of the same idea, right? It's if you're not authorized to speak to that topic, you shouldn't be doing it. But at the same time, again, that I don't know what it's like for you guys, but for us, no comment was sometimes just as bad as saying anything. Where it's like, yeah, no comment on that. I don't want to talk about it. Because the media is very good at putting negative spins on things.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
And so it was always, I don't have that answer for you. Can I direct you to my media relations officer? This is their name. This is their number, whatever it is. Or they just pull out their card and literally just show the card to them, and they knew it was good. They knew it was happening at that point. So anyway, that was just a memory it brought back of mine. So I didn't know what it was, if it was different for your agencies or if that was just something that we had done.
No, it's kind of the same. So they're on the training courses, they're told to go through corporate communications for any type of interview. Always ask permission first when if somebody approaches them about any type of interview, because it has to go through them. I still do that. It's been 9 years. I have to ask permission to make sure that it's okay that I speak to that person.
Mm. So
go
ahead. Yeah, no, please go ahead.
We kind of went over the don'ts. I was going to kind of go over what you can do.
Yeah.
And then Lori, if you want to jump in.
Okay.
With some of them. So again, you kind of want to know your audience. So if you're working in a particular unit, like Lori's pointing, if you're a traffic officer or you're a crime prevention officer or you're a neighborhood policing officer, whatever it is that what your role is or what you're posting on, know that area, that particular area that you're working in, and know your audience. If they're looking for, clearly they're going to come to your social media account for that content. So that's kind of what they're looking for, because they know that you're passionate about it, or you're a subject matter expertise. You have some value to add to them in a topic that they're interested in. So again, coming back to stay in your lane and just talk about who your audience is and what you know. So understand what the needs of your community are. So what type of information are they looking for? Do you have a lot of parents maybe that are on your site? Do they want information about, their kids being on social media and how to stay safe? Or is it about frauds and scams? Or do they, or whatever the topic might be, or maybe an event that's happening in their local area. Because when you know what their wants are or the information that they're looking for, then you can provide that and also have influence on the narrative that you want to share with them. You also want to be somewhat vulnerable. So sharing your story, like I mentioned before, willing to put yourself out there. People connect with knowing that, as officers, we don't always have good days as well. There are some struggles, there are challenges. There's things that we've overcome. Even just getting hired as an officer, it's very rigorous. So allowing someone to see themselves in you by sharing parts of you, or even times that were maybe tough, but then you kind of got through them, that's inspiring and uplifting for people who maybe are experiencing the same thing. Because you can use policing as a platform to share positivity. Have engaging content. So photos, videos, you kind of want to reduce. So you want to reduce having a ton of memes or those GIFs if you're on Twitter. You don't want to take a ton of selfies like Lori had mentioned, because it's not about you. It's about the content that you're providing. It's not like, oh, look at me, here's what I'm doing. Yeah, sometimes you're going to show stuff behind the scenes of what you're doing, but you want to have a proper message behind it for the greater good. Otherwise, it's just kind of like fluff, fluffy information that doesn't really provide any value to anybody. So you can have themes. So if there's national days, weeks or months, you can make relevant topics about what's going on in your area, but kind of use those trends to send a message. And again, it switches up your content as well. You can also, you want to make sure that your content is always looking and staying professional. So you want to be knowledgeable in what you're talking about, but you also, if you're professional, is also how your post looks. So make sure that you have grammatical corrections. You're not have spelling errors. If you're going to tag people in your post, make sure it's the right post. Sometimes different accounts populate and it's, something you're like, oh, what's that? Something uncensored or something, and it comes up to something else and you're like, oh, I have to delete that now because so always after you post, you want to make sure that all your tags are correct. Or even your hashtag, so it doesn't take them down a rabbit hole to something that's inappropriate. So just maybe check your content because again, you are representing professional police service. And then know what your settings are. So in some cases, you want to have private settings, but if you're putting yourself out there and you're doing engagement, you want to make sure that it's a public account so that everybody has access and they can read your information, but also comment and reshare. Sometimes when people set up Twitter accounts, they forget to unlock being able to be tagged and stuff. So again, just look at some of the settings so that you can have the full engagement potential. You want to ask people, if you're going to post other officers or other people in your or in your pictures or your videos, make sure that you have their permission first. There's people who don't want to be on social media, or even other officers, so in the community that don't want to be on social media, or even other officers that maybe want to do undercover work. So be polite and say, hey, I'm going to post this. Are you okay with that? If the answer is no, then don't post it. It's not worth it. Or I've seen images where people blur out other people's faces. As long as it's not going to identify them in any way, then, and they're okay with that, then you can do that. For shortening links, if you're going to add a link to like Twitter or LinkedIn, sometimes I'll use Bitly instead of tagging a whole website, because sometimes it can be like that long. So it'll just shorten up the link so that you actually have more characters to type a message in your content. And then if you're going to be posting like for your agency, then you always want to try to drive traffic back to your agency's website or their programs or content on their website. So always add in a link to whatever you're talking about and then redirect them, like the traffic from social media back to their website. If you're not posting for your agency, you can still add a resource. So if you have a link, as an example, if you were posting about frauds and scams and you wanted to add the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center website because they had top 10, scams of 2020, then you can include that because that's just going to add more value to your content, and it's more likely that someone's going to actually share your post because it's adding value. And then just, knowing what's, so actually going back to hashtags for different campaigns, if you're going to try to do like a different campaign, you can think of different hashtags. As an example, for law enforcement social media, it's hashtag LESM. Or if you wanted to do whatever it is that you're doing for your agency, you can create these hashtags with different topics. And then just a reminder of knowing what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I know we would think that mostly everybody would know what's appropriate and not, but if it looks like it's bad taste or could possibly give a negative public opinion, then, and you're not sure if it will be read that way, then just don't even post it at all. because you don't want, again, to feed into a negative narrative if you mess up and then it goes viral or something like that. Even if you take it down, it can be reposted and still be out there if you've sent something. And then I know we've talked about adding in some humor and kind of being silly and goofy at times, but you want to make sure that you still tone it down and that not all your videos are like lip sync videos or something like that, because you kind of will lose your audience. You want to make sure that you don't lose the message and just you're just doing goofy stuff all the time. It's nice to do sometimes to like get that initial shock or your message out there. But if it's constant, then sometimes you can lose people as well. And kind of to Lori's point, no sexy images or anything like that, especially in uniform. Lori, do you want to add anything to that?
You touched on a lot of really good points. You must have taken a really good course. I don't know.
I learned from the best.
I knew it. I knew she was going to bring it up. I knew she was going to bring it up.
This camera's crooked. There we go. So yeah, staying in your lane is key. Again, you don't want to go off. If you work in crime prevention, don't talk about homicide. If you're in one division posting about a totally different service, depending on what it is, you want to stay in your lane and what you do. People follow you for your role and follow you for whatever personal touch you put on your account. So I will only post stuff, that's relevant to what I do. And you're so right, Amy, with the fluffy stuff. If you put too much of that fluffy stuff out all the time, you're going to lose your audience. They're going to stop following you. So, if you've got nothing to say that day, maybe not post anything. Be careful with the retweets. You don't want an account that all they do is retweet stuff. We will tell officers that, please don't just retweet. If you're going to do that, then don't use social media, because you want to add value to tweets. You want to add value to your account, and you're not doing that if you're constantly retweeting and that's all you're doing. It's okay to do that. I retweet, but you can do that, but don't make it your only thing. And as for, GIFs or GIFs, I'm still not too sure how that's pronounced. Be careful with those. Yeah, once in a while they're funny to use, but don't use them all the time. Again, you lose that credibility and the value to your social media account if you're constantly using those. You touched on, there was another point that you made that I wanted to talk about, and I don't remember what it was. There's a lot of don'ts and there's a lot of do's.
I was going to say themes. Like, you do a lot of themes. I know you're very engaging with that.
With themes?
With, different themes. I mentioned Bitly.
I have a question. Just on a clarification. I know, Lori, when you were saying retweets, is that a generalization for just like resharing posts, not just on Twitter, but on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, stuff like that? Or
Instagram's a little different if you repost it. Sometimes if they've got some great content and you don't really have anything you want to add to their content, then just repost it. If you have something valuable to add to what's already being said, then absolutely add your content when you repost it. Same with LinkedIn, right? If you're constantly just resharing other people's stuff, that's great. That person's going to thank you because you're getting their stuff out there, but you want to add value for your own account. So if you have something to add to that, then fantastic, do it, right? The other thing is if you're putting out a post and you pause and you go, should I? Oh, I don't know. I'm not too sure about this. Then don't do it. That is your sixth sense telling you don't post that. And it's going to come back and bite you in the butt. So if you hesitate or pause about posting something, your best bet is don't do it. Because it's your sixth sense telling you not to do it, because there's a reason that post shouldn't go out. So if you do hesitate, it's probably not worth putting out there. Know that with Twitter is one platform you cannot edit your posts. So Amy touched on that. When tagging people, that's what I want to talk about. When tagging people on Twitter and you're using a photo, you can tag up to 10 people in your photo. So if you're opening an account and you're part of an agency, please make sure that you've turned on the anyone's able to tag you, because if you don't do that, and I want to tag you in a post and I can't tag you in the photo, I can only put you in the post. It's irritating because you want to keep your post clean. So you want to tag them in the photo, keep their handles out of the tweet, and it makes it a lot cleaner and easier to read. So that's one key thing to do. And if you're an ambassador for your service, as what we call it, and you're opening up either corporate accounts, and I know what part of it is, oh, I don't want people tagging us in inappropriate stuff. You can untag yourself in photos for one, on all platforms. But that, don't be afraid of that. I've never had, I shouldn't say never, but rarely get tagged in things that are inappropriate that I'm like, oh, please take me off that. That it doesn't happen. And it's much easier for other people and agencies to tag you in stuff.
Lori, I was just going to ask, since you operate, or you've designed and operate social media training, if law enforcement agencies are looking to, let's say, start something up and they want to train up their officers, because the reason why I'm asking this is because there's a tendency, if we don't, let's say officers don't feel comfortable in a certain aspect, it's easier for people to just say, well, I'm not going to go there. I don't really know about it enough to like put myself out there. And so, and all of these things could go wrong. And because of the atmosphere right now within, with having public scrutiny and all that, thinking that being on social media is a bad thing because there's possibility where something could go wrong or someone could say something. So, and then the mindset of like, just don't even use it then. Don't even go on social media, just avoid it altogether. If an agency is looking to, okay, like we want to try this, or we want to utilize social media a little bit better, and they were looking to create a training course for their members, what are the components that they would need to organize a training, and like what are the meat and potatoes that they should cover off?
Oh, so what should you have in a course?
Yeah, so what if an agency wanted to design a course to train their officers, what are the things that they should have in their course to make sure they cover all their bases from a legal standpoint and all that? Yeah,
so you obviously because a lot of people that take these courses, they don't, like for you and I and Adam, we all know the language of social media because we've been on it and we've been doing it for a while. So you want to take your time, and you're starting from scratch with a lot of people that have never touched Twitter, and they don't know what a tweet is, or a retweet, or a quote tweet. So you need to make sure that your course is a proper length where you can train them, and where they're not extremely overwhelmed. They're going to be overwhelmed regardless because it's a lot of information. Train them on all the platforms they're going to be using. You want to have somebody from your corporate communications come in and speak and talk about their role and how they'll be engaged with you and in regards to social media and corporate communications. You want to have, if you have like a professional standards unit or internal investigations unit, whatever it's called at your agency, have them come and speak and say, hey, this is what could go wrong. And, we don't want to see you get in trouble. We want to keep you out of trouble. So they'll talk about kind of that stuff and stuff that could harm you, whether it's on your work account or personal accounts. If you have some community members that are really engaged, or they've engaged your agency on social media, or some great thing has happened because of social media for that agency, bring them in as a guest speaker. If you have top officers that are your powerhouse officers that are doing a great job on social media, bring one of them in to speak and show them their account. So they have a different view of a corporate account, a single officer's account, and how that kind of works and how it looks. But you want to cover it so when they walk out of that room, they have an idea of what they're doing. They understand the do's and don'ts. They understand that now you've walked out, you've been fully trained, you know what not to do and what to do, and it's on you to make sure that you run that account in the way that you should. The other thing I learned was a great tool that I created was basically a booklet. And it takes a while because you got to screen grab everything, of how to, for Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, how to post, how to retweet, how to repost, how to post a video, how to post a link, how to use hashtags, all the things you learn, but you walk out and you go, how do I do that again? And that's usually what happens, right? So they have this digital booklet that they can refer to until they're comfortable using social media. So I think that is key. So they walk away with something, because it is very overwhelming for somebody who's not already on social media.
Those are all great points, Lori. If somebody wanted to create a social media account, Do you have any tips for somebody on like their name, or like how do they create their voice on social media? Or like if I'm just starting from scratch, like how should I choose my name, or what should I even do for that?
So this is my own personal opinion. One, if you're going to have multiple accounts, so say you're going to have Twitter and Instagram, Facebook's a little different because you're going to have your real name there. But Twitter and Instagram, I always say have the same handle. So if I'm a community member and I know that your name is, the Yoga Cop, I'm going to look for that same name on Instagram. And if you have the same name, it's a lot easier. You want to be searchable. These are your public accounts, not your personal accounts, your public accounts. You want to be searchable. Make your name memorable. Mine's the Coffee Cop, and the crazy things that have happened because of that name. I drink a lot of coffee. It is a true story. I love coffee, and if I don't have it in the morning, it's not a pretty sight. So it's catchy though. People remember it. I've been, walking into stores and I get people saying, "Are you the Coffee Cop?" It's kind of weird sometimes, but it happens. If I'm Officer 56739, do you think people are going to remember that? People don't remember numbers. So you want to have a handle that's appropriate yet catchy and easy to remember.
My favorite post of my favorite Coffee Cop Coffee Cop post is always the May the 4th, where the Star Wars, where the Force be with you. May the 4th be with you. The little stormtrooper stirring your coffee.
Right?
Yeah.
Two things that I want to mention on this one. I love the handle, keeping your handle the same. That's something that we've always done, or I've always been cognizant of. Even in creating, and this is more specifically for those of you out there that are starting your own business, whether it's law enforcement training or whatever it is, whatever you're getting into, you have to be really cognizant of that. And actually, a lot of what we do around developing the business names and everything, or events or anything, we research the social media handles first so that we know we can actually standardize them before we pick a name for something. And that's just an extra step. But like Lori was saying, it makes a massive difference because, for example, with the ILET network that we just rolled out, our website is ILET.network. Our social media handle is @ILET network. And that doesn't matter if you're on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. YouTube is the ILET or /ILET network. On LinkedIn, it's /ILET network. It's the same. And because it's standardized, and it makes it so much easier for people to find you. Yeah. And it also makes it easier when you're creating content. If say you want to do branded content, it makes it a lot easier because I can just add the @ILET network on anything and I can post that image on any account and it's going to work. So it really helps, especially when you're talking about bulk creating content. It also helps you in that aspect as well. And now I can't remember what my other point was. So
it'll come back to you.
Probably not. Probably not. I completely lost it.
Been there.
Yeah. Can't remember.
I was gonna say,
for anybody,
it would come back to you.
Yeah. Well, no, this wasn't it. This is something completely different, but I'll sell it off as it was. Okay. If you look in the comments right now, I actually posted both Amy's and Lori's Instagram accounts on there, so you can actually click on them and go check them out. So Amy's is the Yoga Cop and Lori's is the Coffee Cop. They're both there. You guys didn't know each other before you came up with the names, I think, right? It was kind of a coincidence. Mm-hmm. And so who's the other? I'm gonna draw. He's gonna be so mad now that I forgot. From
Brian.
What's that?
Not Brian.
Yeah, Brian.
Brian and Body.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, with Coffee with a Cop. What is that's the show, the podcast?
Well, Cappuccino.
Cappuccino.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's a theme with police.
Coffee, and you know what? You heard it here first. I like donuts. I don't know about Amy, but I like donuts.
All I'm saying is when I went down to Toronto to sit in to Lori's social media course, they told me about San Marino's bakery Have you heard of this place? Anyway, donuts from scratch. So it's like top shelf donuts.
Yeah.
They're not open on Mondays.
This is the first time donuts have come up in one of these IRTs, which is amazing because we're 10 months in on this now. So the fact that it took us 10
Somebody
months
had to do it.
referencing donuts.
Where we all had a donut and then we just
Shut up. Yeah, we could have done a Timmy's commercial. And for
branding, we can't do branding.
Yeah.
See, Amy,
No
you're
endorsement.
supposed to say that.
yeah, I can do branding because I just sell it.
Yeah, you're not a police officer, so that's
I can do whatever I want.
Yep, good point.
That brings up a whole nother thing too, is I mean, for officers that are doing things on their own, there is a way to separate your personal brand. Say you have your own personal business, and to separate that from your agency, you just have to be very cognizant about it. We have a lot of people that work with us, that are trainers, that you've seen on this program itself, that have their own private businesses and are still active duty law enforcement, but they keep the two very separate.
Yeah.
And so that's just something you have to be cognizant of. And if you are looking at starting your own business, you have your own business and you're unsure of how to follow those rules and regulations, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure you can reach out to either of these two ladies. We'll kind of help guide you along the process and give you the tools for that. But it's just an important point. We're not saying that you can't do it. We're just saying that if you do it, you have to be careful about what you put out there.
Yeah, no crossovers. Like, don't retweet your personal stuff on your work account so you can get more traction. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanted to reference this one more time. This page. So this was, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave a link in the description here for everybody in the comments. I'll give you guys a Google Drive link so you can download this PDF. But this was something I wanted to kind of circle back to when we were talking about agencies and them building out their social media platforms. This basically breaks down by agency size who in the agency is actually taking over the role of the social media manager. And I think the big thing that we notice is obviously PIOs are a good chunk of it.
Yeah.
But you'll see that it's very common in larger agencies, whereas a smaller agency may not even have a public information officer designation in their entire agency. And so then it drops down to chief executive, to command staff. There's a good chunk of civilian personnel where they'll outsource it to either civilian personnel on staff or sometimes even subcontract a company, a social media agency, to do their social media for them. When it comes to this type of breakdown, what do agencies need to know about who they're putting in charge of their social media platforms?
Well, it's interesting looking at that chart because as soon as you hit chief executive and command staff, and in larger agencies, that shrinks drastically. If you notice, and it's the smaller agencies that have their chief and their executive staff on social media. I think it's key that your agency, I think it needs to come from the top. You need to have the buy-in from your executive officers for the social media, for it to work, all the way down to the officers that are on the street using the social media. I think you definitely need that. But what was your question again? Because I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, just what do agencies need to know about who they're putting in charge of their social media platforms?
You have to have people, and I think I wanted to mention this earlier, and I never did, probably because I forgot, that want to do it. We have found in the past that when you're told to open up a social media account, it doesn't usually work because they don't want to do it. It's not productive. You're not getting information out there that should be going out because the person is begrudgingly doing it. So if you're going to have an agency, it should be coming from your corporate communications. That's where it should start, and your executive command officers. But you want to have them start with it, and people that want to do it. That is key, is bringing in the people. And I think Yael mentioned this, having people that want to do it, that are invested in using social media for that purpose. And you get way more buy-in from those officers when you do that. But it should be corporate communications. Definitely, it is a communication tool. So that's where it should come from.
Lori, to the point that you had with saying like having executive command or like supervisors, like leadership coming from the top down, on some of these social media sites. And some agencies, are seeing a shift where before it was just in certain community units where officers were on the social media sites. Whereas now, chiefs or deputy chiefs or other types of superintendents and whatever the rank system is for your agency are starting to get onto social media as well because they see the value of it. The one thing about the executive command or like supervisors being on social media as well is they're able to see the work that their officers are doing, all the good work, because there's a lot of volunteering that goes on. There's a lot of good work that's being done behind the scenes, that not behind the scenes in the sense of people not being aware of it. It's more so, when you look at news media, sometimes they're publishing a lot of the negative content and they're not covering some of the positive stuff that we're doing. So it's a way for agencies to shine a spotlight back on a lot of the positive stuff that they are doing for their communities. And when supervisors are also on social media, they can see what their people are doing, but also connect with them. How many times, and this more so for like larger organizations, because some organizations could have 2,000 or, I don't know how many New York has, is it 10,000 or something? Or you've got these really large organizations and, you don't know all the work that maybe each, like everybody's doing. And so this gives the opportunity for other members to know what other units do. So, as an example, when I was a crime prevention officer, there was a lot of members who didn't know all the different services that we provided to the community, but also internal supports for our members. So by educating all of the employees on what resources, internal resources they have to help them do their jobs better. Again, social media is an effective way to even just educate your own officers on what some of these units are doing. So definitely a positive win. I'm surprised on that chart that crime prevention officer was at the bottom because, essentially we're trying to, yes, you need enforcement, but you also need engagement. And one of the main things is making sure that people feel safe in their community and that you're reducing crime. And how you can do that is, using, as an example, social media as an educational tool to have outreach to explain how people can prevent the certain crimes from happening. So if you're, as an example, if you're teaching the community on letting them know there's a crime trend, or reminding them around holiday seasons to make sure that they're locking their car doors. If they have shopping bags that are in plain sight to prevent car break-ins, or, don't leave your vehicle running when you're running to go pay for gas because, someone might come and steal your car. So if there's certain trends like that, then you're educating the community on what to do, what not to do, so that they can also participate in the fight against crime. And it's not just police trying to do everything themselves, because essentially the community is the eyes and ears of the community. And, going back to that other chart that you had where, having avenues where people can report crime or, crime tips that they've seen something or they've heard something, giving people that avenue. So again, without these social platforms, it's hard to have that type of participation from the community as well.
Agreed. And I think another key thing, and I don't know if we touched on this, if you have officers that have account and they're very active and they either go to another service or they retire, it is key to let them know that you need to either change your account, not like remove all your policing stuff, because that sometimes is impossible if you've got 40,000 tweets, but remove the policing aspect. You could put retired officer in your heading. And the other key thing with that too is when they're active, not to use their service's crest as their photo, because it really confuses people with the corporate accounts, because usually that's what a corporate account will use. We'll use the crest for their service. So be careful with that. Or if you have an officer, we'll have some on the course that will come in, they'll do the course. 6 months have passed and they've put out their first tweet was, hey, it's my first day on the social media course. And that's the last thing they posted. At some point, and I say to them, you know what, I'm not going to take it personally. If this is not your thing, please close your account. Please delete it and just let us know that you've deleted it. Because the worst thing you can do for a service is to have all of these inactive accounts out there because maybe somebody's looking to speak to an officer, they're running these names, they see all these accounts and they're all inactive and haven't tweeted in 3 years. So it is key to make sure that these accounts are closed down if they're not using them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. I added the link to the article that I was talking about. That's in the comments for everybody. It's a Google Drive link. You can get that and download it from there if you'd like. Real quickly, and I want to circle back because I kind of lost track. I trailed off when Amy was talking there about the chiefs and stuff like that, and getting how they're more and more on social media. I want to just cycle back real quick so everybody can see it on LinkedIn. I'm going to share my LinkedIn page here just to kind of go back to what I talked about before, where if you're on a platform like this, just to show how many chiefs and stuff like that are on these platforms and command staff. If you're looking to talk to somebody who is a decision maker, this is just my personal account. And all it is I can go into my connections and I can search for people. And all I do is I go into filters and I can search for connections that are in law enforcement, that are first connections and are chiefs. And I can apply that. And it shows, like it says, about 1,000 results. So I have about 1,000 direct contacts that are either chiefs of police, assistant chiefs of police, or retired chiefs of police. And so, I mean, obviously not everyone's going to have, I have a lot of contacts because I've been developing my account, but that's just an example of ways that you can generate these collaborations and contacts with people on social media very, very simply. And it's something as simple as going into a platform like LinkedIn, going to selecting people that you're not connected with, and then going through and hitting the connect button. It's really very that simple. So I can go, if I want to connect here with Wayne, I can connect with him. I can add a quick note if I want to, or if not, and I can just send that to him. And chances are that he'll respond in one way or the other. So it's interesting just how accessible people are nowadays on the various platforms.
Adam, to your point with that as well as, you're doing yourself a disservice, not even just as an agency, but even just as an individual officer, not being on social media at all. And the reason why I say that is because when you're on social media, you are now tapped into an overall communication. You have a pulse on what's happening in your industry because you're getting updates, you're getting information, you're connecting with other people in your industry, whether it's provincial or state or at the national level, and you're having these shared conversations. So then, if you're expanding, as an example with ILET, at a global scale, you realize that there's a lot of people in your industry having the same conversations or the same problems, or other organizations have come up with solutions for certain types of things. So if you're not online and you're not connecting through these platforms, then essentially your ears are closed and you don't really, you don't have an ear to the ground. Like you don't know maybe what's coming ahead, or maybe things you could be enhancing at your agency, or even just in the work that you do like daily, if you're not part of that conversation. So essentially you have the ability to information gather to improve your police agency, but also to do a better job at what you're doing, because you're in the know with some of the evidence-based practices and other types of information that you can gather.
That's a great point. And one of the things that I'm glad you brought that up, because I would have totally not remembered to bring it up on this conversation. When you have an account, you have to be cognizant of the people that you follow on your account. So if you're using your account, for example, information gathering, it doesn't make sense to only add accounts and stuff that you like. For example, in the United States, things are very, very politicized. I mean, they are up here in Canada as well, but very politicized in the US. So if you're looking to get information on what's happening, it doesn't make sense to only follow people that you agree with. It actually benefits you to follow accounts that are completely different opinions than your own, because it gives you it's kind of a litmus test as to what information are people getting outside of what you're putting out there. And so if you're running an agency account, put that in the back of your mind, is that maybe as an agency account, if you're going to be monitoring those things, that you actually look at the accounts that you wouldn't necessarily think of following, but think of the accounts that your community is going to be following, and maybe do follow those yourself, because it's going to give you a better understanding of what they're paying attention to on social media. And a lot of the times it'll help you get ahead of the game, especially if there's going to be a lot of hot button topic media things that are coming out rapid fire. It allows you to get ahead of that and put your own content out as a way of sharing the true story if there is some type of disinformation or misinformation being put out there. So that was just a point that I thought of when you brought that up.
No, and that's brilliant. I think, and Amy, if you remember it from the infamous Scott Mills, he would say, "Listen, and your influence will grow."
Yeah.
End quote. Scott Mills.
Awesome. Okay, before we move on to the next, Leo actually asked a question in here, and I want to talk about that. And I know it's kind of a totally different topic. So, on what we've just spoken about, is there anything left unsaid about just the topics we've been discussing the last half hour or so?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
No, I think we covered up most bases.
Awesome. So Leo's question was, maybe this is not proper forum, but how valuable is social media for officer wellness initiatives? So I'm going to use this as a perfect segue to share the National Emergency Responder Conference that's coming up in November. So because this is on social media, YouTube is a social media platform. It's also a search engine, but it's a social media platform. It's a great way to share information like this. This is a conference that's coming up November 18th. It's completely free to attend. I've added the link in the comments here below for everybody, so please check that out. Register. All you have to do is put in your name, your email, where you are in the world, and what your occupation is. If you're law enforcement, if you're a first responder, civilian, corrections, security, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure to check that out. It's going to be a great resource. And it leads into what we are kind of talking about here with Leo's question about using social media for officer wellness initiatives. One of the things that I've noticed on my personal accounts is I've had a lot of people reach out to me now and say, would you mind being a part of this group? And a lot of the times it's veteran members. So for me, it's a lot of Canadian Forces veteran members or active first responders or law enforcement. And it's basically a peer support group. And so it's on social media that they reach out, and we run these outreaches, and then we host a private Zoom call with everybody, and we have an open and honest discussion that's kind of it's for community wellness, essentially. It's to help everybody out, whether they're dealing with PTSD or a mental health issue. Maybe they're having physical issues or relationship issues or whatever it is. It's a closed community that we can really have open and honest discussion. But I would have only ever known about it because of social media. So I think I want to leave that there and then maybe pass it off to you guys as to your thoughts on using social media for wellness. I know both of you are very, very active in the fitness industry as well. So you guys use that a lot in your own personal account. So I'm going to leave it to you.
Amy, take it away. This is your realm.
Start? Okay.
We
both do wellness aspects. I think it's, kind of the point that we were bringing up about having content that is adding value. So even though, so as an example for my platform, even though I'm sharing information about policing information, I'm also sharing content for other officers because I connect with a lot of other officers as well. So I'll often post not just for my followers who maybe are not in policing, but I'll also post things that would be relevant to other police officers. So one of those things, so, you know, as you mentioned, I'm the yoga cop. So back in 2016, when I created my account, not only was I practicing yoga, and that's a part of me that, you know, because I'm a police officer, but I'm also many other things, and I enjoy other things. So I was bringing that personal aspect into my social media account, but also using that as a platform to share important messages. So, you know, as we know, you know, policing can be really strenuous, and, you know, it can be stressful. We often go to calls that can be that leave a lasting impact, even just on ourselves. Can be very traumatic. The nature of the work can be challenging on some days. So I think it's really important to refocus that wellness aspect back into the job. And, you know, part of our policing culture for a long time was, you know, this is what you signed up for. It's part of the job. You know, suck it up and kind of deal with it. And, you know, we know now that that's if we continue that way, it's not going to function for us as an industry. You know, as an officer, this is a 30-year career. You want to be healthy at the end of that. So, you know, what aspects are we building into our daily routines when we're working as a police officer to make sure that we are keeping balanced with some of the stuff that we deal with, especially in, you know, the times that we're going through right now. So, you know, I do a lot of yoga and meditation work with policing employees, again, to help build those self-regulation techniques, to help alleviate stress and trauma that we deal with. Because some of the work that I was researching and getting into was the effects on how it affects your body unconsciously. Because when we're in these states of hyperarousal, it's a primal response. Our body is just responding unconsciously to these situations. So what can happen over time is, you know, your brain essentially becomes, well, your amygdala in your brain becomes hijacked, and no longer can you come down from that hyperarousal, because you know, and these types of experience are kind of, they are stored in your central nervous system. So the idea is trying to educate officers on the different techniques and tools on how to manage their body states and connecting their minds and bodies so that they can so they can be healthy at work, but also to improve their situational awareness when they're at work. There's all these just research benefits on all the different reasons why these types of like somatic therapies are really helpful. So, you know, and a lot of times too, when officers are getting hired, they're not being educated on a trauma-informed response and a trauma recovery type of response. You know, if everybody was taught how stress and trauma actually changes their body, and then, you know, early on in our career, then we would be able to manage maybe some of the stuff we deal with long-term, because it kind of accumulates. So just understanding that those types of aspects of the job, I think using social media as a platform, you know, if you're passionate about a certain topic, or there's information that you have that it's going to help other people, why wouldn't you use that platform to share it? So absolutely, social media can be used to share that knowledge, and also to create awareness, to reduce stigma. Again, showing that human side of yourself, vulnerabilities, because, you know, even though we're in a role where we're seen as leaders in the community, and we're putting ourselves out there, it doesn't mean that we're, you know, bulletproof from the types of scenarios that we attend, because at the end of the day, we're still human, and it can affect us, you know, with some of the stuff that we see and deal with. So again, it's good to have these practices, and social media can provide that. Laura, I'll let you kind of jump in, because I know you do a lot of mental health work as well.
Yeah, and I think see that's Amy's thing, and that's she does a lot of great work with the wellness portion of it. But with what, you know, Leo's asking as well, is I think that, yeah, it's not only are you helping officers that maybe one aren't ready to reach out for help yet, but this information's out there and readily available for them, so they can use it. I think it helps some of the public too, because we all handle life in different ways and stressors. Like the job that we do, like Amy said, you know, it has a lasting effect on us because we see things that most people don't see. You know, there's studies that show that 25 to 30% of people that are diagnosed with cancer develop PTSD. People have stressors in their life from being victims of crime that can develop PTSD or other mental health issues because of that. So even the stuff that, you know, if you're posting mental health initiatives, that absolutely these, not only can these officers benefit from it that aren't ready to reach out, but the public can as well. So I think it's a fantastic way to do things.
Yeah, I was just trying to look up the actual statistics. I don't want to quote something completely incorrect here, but I'm going to give it a shot anyways. They say the average person, so the average civilian, experiences 2 to 4 like life-changing traumatic experiences in their lifetime, whereas the average police officer experiences around 200. And that's just because of the nature of the work, right? You're being called to, you know, a sudden an infant suddenly passing, or a motor vehicle accident, or, you know, a domestic where somebody ends up getting killed or something like that. And so the cognitive weight of that for officers is so much higher than the general populace. And it's really so important that we start sharing the word on that. And that's kind of a core component, I know, of what both of you do. And it's a core component of what we do here, is trying to raise awareness for that. One of the things, actually, this was brought up before we even hit record. Lori was giving me the gears because there was a while back I did it was a push-up challenge, right? You see those going around on social media a lot, and talking about actual raising awareness. We see the 22 push-ups or 25 push-up challenge going around to raise awareness for mental health and PTSD. And she was giving me the gears because she was like, wasn't it one of your videos, like, weren't your kids like all over you when I was doing it? And it was like, yeah, they were. And the reason being was because every day you had to do push-ups, and I had to find a time during the day to record myself and put it out on social media. And it wasn't always glamorous. It wasn't a professionally set up photo studio where we had just top end photography and everything was good and the graphics were great. A lot of the times it was me taking my cell phone, putting it down somewhere, whether I was outside or inside, and pumping them off and sharing a quick message and sharing it with as many people as I could. And I think there's a real value there. I think there's, to what both of you have been saying the entire day here, is there's a value to sharing your personal story, to showing that human side of who you are. And I know, Lori, I think we've touched on it quite a few times, but you had mentioned to remind you about talking about putting your personal self into your account, and what it is that you should be sharing. So is there anything left on that topic that you wanted to bring up on this?
Well, I think when you have a work account, so you have, you're an ambassador for your service. If you pump out just work-related stuff, you're going to lose people because you're not humanizing yourself, the badge, the uniform that you wear, and people can relate to you if you humanize it. Now, you got to be really careful with what you put out there, and how personal you get. Like posting, I don't recommend posting your kids with your family and pictures from your home. You just got to be really, really careful because, as we all know, there are people undesirable people on social media and trolls and other things. So you have to be really careful when you're posting what's in the photos, how much you're actually sharing with the public about your personal life. So I talk about my running. I don't show where I'm running. I'm very careful with that. I talk about, I have kids. I don't post pictures of them. My one daughter has mental health issues. I will address that on certain platforms when I'm talking, or if we're doing Twitter chats, which we didn't touch on, by the way. And I would like to touch on that for Twitter chats for organizations. So, you want to have a personal side to what you're posting, but be very careful that you don't over-personalize your account and underutilize the policing side of it, if that makes any sense.
Makes sense to me.
And then Twitter chats, we never really touched on that.
No.
Twitter chats is a great tool you can use. So Amy talked about hashtags. Obviously, creating a hashtag, because that is a search tool. So if you decide that you want to use a hashtag and have a Twitter chat, whether it be about, let's say, crime prevention, and you want to talk to your community about, hey, what's going on? What are the issues in our community? You want to have a preloaded maybe 6 questions, because you only do it for an hour. Do it in the evening, usually around 8 o'clock, because even you can get kind of the parents with the younger kids. Hopefully they're already in bed and they can sit down and join you on this Twitter chat. And you pump out the questions, they respond, ensure that they're using whatever that hashtag is that you're created for that Twitter chat. You do it for 1 full hour, you stop at that, you answer, say, if it's the 5 or 6 questions that you've created, and then you can go into an app called, or a website called Twitonomy. I think you pay $20, you get 30 days. You can get all of the data using that hashtag to show your chief, if you're a smaller agency, or your corporate communications, that, look, we've reached 2 million people in 1 hour in regards to our Twitter chat on whatever the topic was. And it'll show you where the tweets came from across the world, who the influencers were, your impressions, everything. And it's a great way to reach your community and kind of engage with them. And that's with Twitter only. You can obviously do Facebook Live as well, and people can answer you there, but you got to be really careful with live stuff, because you can't take that back. You can't, edit that video. You can't do any of that stuff. So Facebook Live is another option, but Twitter chats are a great way to engage your community and get their feedback on stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know one of the things that we wanted to talk about today and kind of touch on it was the use of social media when it comes to investigations. And I was just pulling up an article, and it's a PDF, so I'll probably link it in here. It's from the Polaris Project about how social media is used in sex trafficking and human trafficking, and how they use it as a source of recruitment and stuff like that through organized crime. It's a really interesting read, but it's really in depth. So I'll just post it so people can jump on and read it. But that's just an example of one thing that we can use social media for, because it's not just the cops that are using it. The bad guys are using social media for very nefarious purposes. And so let's talk about that whole process. Amy, when we talk about investigations with social media, what is it that immediately jumps out to you?
Well, first, I'm just going to touch on the point that you brought up where, if you know that there's obviously criminals that are using social media as well to their advantage, and knowing what types of behaviors that they're conducting on social media so that you're aware of it. So not only to help with your investigations, but also to educate the community on that. So as an example, you were talking about human trafficking. If we know that some of these social media sites like Snapchat or, these other like anonymous chat room type of apps are out there, a lot of times criminals will pose to be somebody who they're not. They'll pretend to be, if they're targeting a young person, that they'll pretend to be the same age. And a lot of times for human trafficking, it'll be both men and women that will target young people. So now they're using females as well so that it drops that person's guard because they think maybe that person's safer. But they're using these sites as well to befriend them. On Snapchat, there's a ghost app. There's a ghost. Laura, I guess you can explain this a little bit better, but there's a ghost link where if you don't have your location services turned off, then that's essentially allowing someone to see where that phone is, like where you're posting from. So if they're constantly posting pictures in their bedroom or at their school, well, now they're posting that online or with other people in a shared setting with these strangers. And that's giving that criminal access to know where they are, where to find them. So then maybe they're showing up at the school playground or they just happen to be running into them, or, hey, let's meet up, I'm around the corner. And then the grooming process can start. So educating the community and young people on the potential risks. So yes, use social media, But if you're going to use it, you need to be responsible and know what the inherent risks are so that you can make better choices, because there are a ton of positives when you're on social media, but there's a lot of negatives too. So they need to be aware of what the potential negatives are and how they can keep themselves safe. As an example, another trend that you'll often see is, sites like Kijiji or Craigslist or Let Go, these apps where they're trying to buy and sell products. So oftentimes you'll see they'll set up, hey, let's meet up somewhere because I want to purchase, whatever product that they're trying to sell. But they'll, hey, let's meet up at the school after hours or something like that. But it happens to be like a robbery setup. So again, letting these young people know some of the tactics that criminals use to target them through social media, right? Because a lot of times people are posting a ton of private and personal information online. So not only is it beneficial for officers to go on social media sites to collect information if we're looking for those details, but it's just as easy, not just for officers, but also for criminals to find that information if you're not using your privacy settings and you're just putting all your information out there. So again, it's really important to share that information with the community on how they can be safe from these types of criminals that are actually using social media sites to gain an advantage from them.
Yeah, Robert just posted here that social media is critical when they conduct their active shooter investigations or when they're doing threat assessments. I think that.
Lori, sorry,
go ahead, Lori. Yeah.
I was going to say, Lori, because Lori, you've talked about this in your social media course where youth engagement officers had Snapchat accounts or certain type of social media accounts, and then if there's a crime that happens at the school, everybody's on their phones tweeting and messaging, and you're going to be, if you're not on social media, you're going to kind of lose that, right? So
yeah, so for Twitter, I talk about having lists. So when you have a list, you can make private lists or public lists. If it's public, I can subscribe to your list and have it on my feed so I can look at accounts. But to make, and this is a very brief, because we don't have, we're not on a course here, but if you create a private list through your account, nobody sees it but you. Nobody knows when you add people. So for our school resource officers or community response officers, you can make a private list of accounts that of kids in the schools you deal with. So when a shooting does happen or a stabbing or something happens at a school, kids will inevitably turn to social media, and you just go to that one-stop shop of that private list you have, and you can see what these kids are saying. You can also gain the trust of these kids because you have social media and they can talk to you through social media. So that is key as well. But going back to your settings, because yes, Robert, when these accounts are open, and usually, unfortunately, these kids open these accounts, parents usually don't have any idea, and they don't know how to use it because they just, a lot of parents don't know about all these apps these kids are on, and the apps want your information to be shared with everybody. So usually the security settings are really low, and you need to go in and change them. Most kids don't do that because they want the followers, they want the friends. When they're open, it's great for investigative purposes because you get a lot of information. If they're locked down, that's not going to help you. But 9 times out of 10, they're not locked down, they're wide open. And it leaves some people vulnerable to being victimized, and others, it's information gathering for officers when stuff does happen, because like Amy said, they are gonna turn to social media and post it, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Snapchat. Now, when she was talking about Snapchat, it's when you're in ghost mode. So I have an account because I do snaps and funny faces with my kids. And that's about the only thing I use it for. But I download all of these apps and a whole bunch of other ones to understand how they work for policing side of things. But with Snapchat, if you're not in ghost mode, and you're posting stories, you can go to map.snapchat.com if you don't have an account, and anything, you can put in an address, you can put in a city, you can put in a location, and anyone that has posted a story, so it's their last story, whatever that story is, it could be 7 hours ago, it could be 2 seconds ago, it will populate and pop up. They kind of give you like a thematic map, and you'll see, and as you zoom in, you'll see the accounts, you click on them, and you can see their videos. If you're in ghost mode, that will not happen because you're a ghost. Nobody sees you. Casper, Friendly ghost.
Very interesting. I also
I'm
have
starting to lose my mind now. It's getting late. See, it's past my bed.
I also have Snapchat. I have one person on my Snapchat. That's my wife, and all I get is stupid videos of the kids when they do dumb things.
Yeah, I just know my kids and the stupid stuff they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
To Lori's point, though, if investigators are aware of these types of sites, though, so we said map.snapchat.com, if there's, let's say, a shooting, or if there is some type of crime that has just occurred, or I know, was talking about protests and stuff like that. Essentially, it shows up a geographical map of pretty much the whole world, and you can zoom into any particular area to the point where you can click on all the different snaps that are happening, and you can ultimately see people's conversations like right on that street block if they're talking back and forth, if they don't have the ghost mode on. So again, that's another way that you can collect information. Just being aware of the resources that are available to you for your investigation, as an example, knowing to reach out to Crime Stoppers to work with them to see what information is coming forward, so that you can build that into your investigative case. Also, different organizations and companies like Uber, for example, even a lot of these social media sites that we're talking about, they have a law enforcement response team, or they have like a law portal where if you need to reach out to them because you need to find out, certain information about a crime that has occurred, they will sometimes they'll give you information right away depending on what it is, and if it's more involved, then you'll have to have a protection order in place. But they'll shut down accounts, they'll help support policing or police officers' investigations where they need to for that information.
How good are the social media companies at cooperating with law enforcement? I mean, I understand that everyone has their own opinions on companies like Facebook and how they censor, pro police posts and stuff like that from accounts. Even companies like, I know I was talking about LinkedIn about how much I like them, but they've actively censored people that post pro police posts on there, that whether it's articles or whatever, they'll actually just ban them or shadow ban them from the sites. Does that create a difficulty for law enforcement agencies when they're trying to work with them and to get information for investigations?
I don't have personal experience to speak on that specifically. I know Lori and Scott have worked with Twitter, and they had a personal relationship with them when they were trying to develop accounts and stuff. Now for the investigative side, I'm not too familiar with that. I don't know, Lori, if you have anything to add.
Not personally, because I don't deal with the investigative side, but I have officers and friends that have worked in our cybercrime unit, and they have connections with Facebook, with Twitter. You have to get the stuff you need. But even then, I know one officer was waiting on and you want to talk about old school, it wasn't even that long ago, a CD from Facebook, and he finally got it. It took about 8 months, and it was broken. And then they had to send him another one. So can you get it? Yeah, absolutely. But having those connections and understanding that, hey, Facebook's American, but they have a Canadian office. So that's going to be a difference between a production order and an MLAT, and you're going to get your information a lot quicker knowing that we have that Canadian office. So again, I'm not fully versed on the investigative side of things because that wasn't my niche, but they absolutely have connections with a whole bunch of the apps, and some they don't.
I was going to say too, as officers, when we're dealing with the community, we're trying to get information, or we're collecting information as part of our investigation. Now that, obviously a lot of people are turning to everything's virtual right now because of COVID. So you've got virtual, even our court system is changing over to the virtual aspect where you don't have to even, some places, you don't have to attend in person. They're actually doing video conferences for court or calling in. So, just being mindful of all of these changes that are happening, and, collecting people's email addresses so that you can have that on file, or even asking somebody if they're on social media, okay, what's your handle if you're on it? there's been cases that I've worked on, or even just in the process, like active investigation, you know, as an example, there was a home invasion that I was investigating, and we ended up figuring out what the social media account was. And there were pictures on that social media account that described the suspect to a T in those photos. Same vehicle, same description, same clothing, and whatever they're wearing, which again adds evidence to your case on with all the other stuff that you have, for the reasons why, and it adds to the grounds for your arrest as well. So again, thinking outside the box, even when you're at a scene, trying to get enough intel so that you can figure, okay, what is this person's name, and or do they have a social media account? Taking a look to see what type of evidence is there, because sometimes people actually will post things, which will help your case. You know, there's times where, you know, and this goes back to the example of educating, you know, young people. There's times where people are posting stuff online and it's a crime. Like what they're posting, you know, it's them posting a picture of a gun illegally, or, you know, they're in a store actively causing damage, but they're posting it thinking it's funny. Meanwhile, you know, how good is that evidence going to be when you bring it to court? Because essentially that's a confession of, or showing them in the act right on video, right? So try to use that to support some of your evidence as well.
Yeah, like I always say, there's a physical crime scene, and in this day and age, 99% of the time, there's a digital crime scene as well that's going to attach to that physical one.
I think that was really evident, and I don't know too much about it, but somebody sent me the actual case evidence from the Breonna Taylor case from the U.S., and a good portion of that was actually evidence that they pulled off of social media, and text messages and everything, but showing Facebook communication, showing Instagram images, and all these different things, but they used it to compile their evidence, which is what they ended up using to get their warrant, and then we all know what happened with that whole gong show. So, but it's a very common tool, and it should be utilized as much as you possibly can, right? I mean, it's there, so why not? If you're an officer who's conducting an investigation, if you don't know what to look for, there's people, I'm sure, in your agency that can guide you through the process of, here's how to find someone's Facebook account if you have no idea how to find it. Here's how to find someone's social media accounts. Here's how to get the information from it. Is there a best practices for officers that maybe have no idea about how to track things down on social media, that you guys can think of, kind of like a quick to-do list for them, so that they have a starting point?
So if they don't have accounts, doesn't mean you can't see stuff. If accounts are wide open, you know, you put in their name and Facebook, so John Smith Facebook, and then in Google it's going to show anyone that has that name, and then you click on Facebook, and you may or may not fit it. It may be there. With our we have a lot of protests. I look up their accounts; they're wide open. I can look at their stuff, and then you just Google it, you'll find it. You can put in John Smith Instagram, John, whatever the app is, and it will bring up any accounts that are attached to those. You may click on it, it may be locked down, you can't see anything, or you may click on it and it's wide open. So you do not have to open up these accounts. And with our agency, you can't do internet investigations without a course. We have a special course that kind of gives you the blessing because you're taught properly how to do it. So be very careful with that. Be very careful with opening up fake accounts so you can creep people. Also, I think what's a key point here is, if you have a personal account and you don't have a work account, or you have a work account, say Facebook, even Instagram, and you're creeping people, or what you think is creeping people, be very, very careful with doing that, because when you are looking up people through your work account or your personal, that account will show up on theirs as people you may know. Because you've creeped them, Facebook wants to connect you. They want to let that other person know that you've been creeping them, basically, and you're going to appear on theirs as people you may know. I had a probation officer who one of her clients' mothers showed up on her personal Facebook because she was creeping her to look at her account. So again, settings are key, and that's a whole other conversation, because I could go on for hours about personal settings and locking your accounts down. But be very careful who you creep, especially if you're using personal accounts. Don't do it. Because it's going to show up. And same with Instagram, because it never used to, but remember, Instagram's owned by Facebook. So there's a lot of similarities with the two. And you'll see that, hey, now all of a sudden, if you've noticed on Instagram, it'd say, you may know so-and-so. Have they looked at my account or tried to get into it? Maybe, or we have mutual friends. So you got to be really, really careful with doing that for investigative purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention too, if someone's lost at maybe how to even like find, let's say John Doe's name, ask people's family, ask their friends, see if they'll give you information or even their own account information. Because like to Lori's point, sometimes you can actually find that person's account through their associates.
Yeah.
So you can look at their friend list or who they're connected to, and you can locate their account that way. Unless, you're not sure what the profile picture is or what the handle and their name is. But those are some other ways that you can kind of figure out who they're connected with. If you're not sure maybe what the person's name is.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great points. I love.
Quickly mention too, because I saw that Aaron made a comment about, he mentioned Breaking Barriers United, which is awesome. Ryan Tillman, he, you've seen his account. Does a lot of youth education and teaching, but he has these Tillman takes, and he on his Instagram will actually show video footage of like body camera images or like video, and he'll walk through like the do's and don'ts, or like he'll break down. So he's part of the conversation that maybe people are having, whether it's negative or positive. And so he's got all sorts of different videos there. He's doing an awesome job. Talks about leveraging social media. So if you're not sure maybe what to do or how to do it, even just take a look at his account and see some of the content that he's providing. Now, a lot of some of what he's doing is on his own time, but he has mixed in some of the law enforcement aspects of what he's doing. But he also runs his own business. So again, this is just an example of some types of content that can be produced with positive messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, he's what Ryan's doing is awesome. He's been doing it for a while too, and he's very versed in how to really tie the two together, right? Like we were talking about having a personal account versus your business account or agency account. He kind of has like a perfect mesh of that with his own personal message, and then with the sharing and knowledge and information about policing. So he's a great resource. One question before, I guess I want to move on to a question that came up, but before we do that, is there anything left on the investigation side that you guys want to cover?
No.
Okay.
Check with your agency's policy, right? Before you start doing, undercover accounts and digging, make sure that you're not doing something you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. The question that came up here was from Aaron. He was saying he understands there's a lot of parallels between law enforcement and security, but do you have any specific advice for security social media accounts? I guess for Aaron, the biggest difference, I guess, is a security company is going to be a private corporation, whereas a police agency is not. And so there's still policies and procedures. So the biggest thing is for you, you're going to have to know what your company's policies and procedures are for social media, because they should have guidelines for you, just like any law enforcement agency will. Your private corporation will have those. And the reason being is because of the civil liability that could be attached to anything that you do through that company or that's associated with that company, versus what would happen if you were attached to a law enforcement agency. So.
And I would also say that security companies probably don't want their operational matters shared probably the same way as law enforcement. But I think there would be ways in security to offer value because when you think about security, people want to know about how to keep themselves safe, how to keep their businesses safe, how to keep their home safe. So if you can spin it to more of like a crime prevention aspect or, prevention methods, I think that would be really key too, because you're still adding value, but maybe not sharing some of the operational stuff that you're doing for that liability aspect.
Yeah, we found really good success. It doesn't matter where I am in the country. We use social media. So one of the things that I kind of specialized in was loss prevention. And there was a lot of groups where it was groups of boosters, or organizations, or just groups of people that would go in and rip off stores. And they'd either have a set plan or whatever, but it's where they would kind of go to either sell the merchandise that they boosted, or to share information about, hey, go to this store because there's no LPOs there or anything like that. What we did was, when we got one of these shoplifters, we caught them and we were sitting there talking with them, if you could develop enough rapport, they let us into the actual accounts. They were closed group accounts. And we were able to negotiate with them to the point where it's like, hey man, if you just give me our stuff back and accept me to this group of yours, I'll let you go. And what they would do is they'd actually allow us, or they would admit us into this group, or give us the information on how to get into the group. And then we kind of had a back door, and we knew where all of the shoplifters were going to be hitting, or what they were targeting for any specific time period. So we were able to use social media on the security side of things for that aspect. Again, though, you have to be very careful, like Lori was saying, about if you're going to create these accounts to kind of go in and backdoor these groups or these people, and kind of be sneaky about it. Just be very cautious about how you're setting them up, because again, usually these are types of people that you don't want them to have your personal information, or your home address and things like that. So.
Yeah, Adam, that's a good point that you mentioned too, because I know, so even just like for like retail stores and stuff like that, for the security aspect, if so sometimes they'll use social media to release an image of somebody who's maybe committed a crime on their property, or like theft and stuff like that, as long as it's in partnership with an active investigation. So if there is a policing agency that's actively working on that, then it's no longer bound by the the privacy laws of information sharing, with privacy laws when it comes to the private sector. So if a law enforcement agency has an active case, again, you also want to make sure that you're working with them to make sure that you're not releasing the image if you shouldn't be, because there is a strategic plan with releasing certain investigative information depending on the circumstances. So you always want to make sure that you're not just like throwing information out there, and that you're communicating with that investigative unit. If a face needs to be blurred out, or maybe if you want to crop, sometimes you want to show what they're wearing, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want to just crop the face maybe. And there's certain aspects of the investigation that you don't want to share, and some that you do, depending. So again, that could also be a tool to help provide tips from the community if somebody sees that post and then, oh, hey, I saw that person, or I know who that is, and then they can call it in. Because the community is a huge help with those types of things, and in partnership with security as well.
You bring up a fantastic point, and it totally jogged my memory. When we talk about these groups where we share information, it goes both ways. And this is something you have to be very cautious of if you're in the security industry. A lot of what we used to like to do back in the day was I would take a screenshot of the CCTV system, and I would share that to all of the security officers in the city and say, does anybody know this guy? Things like that. We have to be very cautious about doing that, because we depending on laws and or your company's own corporate policy, you could be getting yourself in hot water. A lot of the times what you would have to do is the release of that information, whether it be a CCTV video or a snapshot, would have to go to a law enforcement agency and then be disseminated by that agency to the private companies, depending on the type of investigation they were running. And so we got around that by developing community policing programs, where we would all sit into a room together. We would have the law enforcement representative there and all of the private companies. We'd hand the photo to the officer, and the officer would hand them out to everybody. We're all in the same room. We can talk about it. So we had some workarounds. But when it comes to social media, just be cautious that if you're taking a snapshot or a social media image and you're sharing it privately in this group, just know that depending on how litigation rolls out and how this whole case happens, you could be potentially putting yourself at risk, criminally or civilly, depending on how that information was shared. So, Just
I was going to say, there's been times too where that's happened, and then that image gets leaked to the media, and then they get a hold of it. And you can bet that there will be an internal investigation to who has leaked that information, whether you're in policing or whether you're in the private sector, like in security. And they're not going to take that very nicely. So there's times in security where people have lost their jobs because that's against their policy, taking pictures and then sharing it with their friends or whatever else. And then next thing you know, it ends up on social media or gets leaked to the media. And then the victim gets re-victimized, or their family, because some of the information that's on there is super sensitive, or it's violent in nature. And again, can be very sensitive for the family if that's shared, or if the narrative isn't controlled a certain way.
Yeah, you got to ask yourself the question, where do all these CCTV video come of all these violent incidents that you see all over social media? You have to ask yourself, where do they come from? Usually it's from somebody who has access to that system, recording that and then putting it out on social media without permission. And so you see it on social media, it gets a bunch of media coverage, and it's good or bad or indifferent. What you don't see is on the back end what the repercussions are of that individual that leaked that footage, because that'll never get talked about. But I guarantee you it's generally not good for the person that they tracked that was actually the vector of that information getting out.
Yeah, another thing too I was going to say for investigations is you never want to use your personal phone to take pictures. If you have to take pictures of an investigation, obviously use your criminal investigation camera, borrow one or whatever, because your phone could be, they can, what's the word? Sorry, it's late.
Please.
They can confiscate your phone, and the court can issue, because the images are on your phone. So not only will they take your phone and take the images, but they'll have access to everything else that you have on your phone, and you don't want that happening. So
I used to teach that part of our course when we talk about best evidence. And we'd teach them when they're collecting evidence. If you're taking photos with your phone, if you last resort, you have to take photos with your phone. You take the photo, you email that photo to your work account, and then you delete every record of that photo off of your phone. So it is no longer housed on your phone. It's housed on your email account. And then your best option would be to actually print that out as a hard copy, sign it, date it, and then actually delete the digital copy of the photo as well. So you have your hard copy photo, and that's your best evidence at that point, and it's not on your actual personal phone anymore. But there's a lot of different workarounds you can have for that. So that's an interesting conversation in itself. We have 10 minutes left. We've gone through almost 3 hours. Like I told you, this stuff flies by. It goes by so fast. We've talked about 1,000 different things. But I want to give each of you a second to discuss anything that you want to talk about, last words of wisdom or anything that we've talked about today.
There's one point, I don't know what made me think of it, but I didn't mention earlier, when dealing with your social media account, your work social media account. So if your corporate account puts out a missing person, and they usually attach a photo to it, whether it's a youth or an older person, you have to remember, I think the key and the best practice for this is, if that person is found, then that tweet needs to be deleted. If you are an ambassador for your service and you want to spread that missing person tweet, please don't quote tweet it or add their name into that quote tweet, which is you're adding your value to that tweet. So the original tweet's in it and yours as well. Just retweet it, so then when your organization deletes it, it deletes off your feed as well. Because what is happening is that, whether it's a young person that, was going through a rough time and they went missing and they were reported, and then now they've changed their life around and they're trying to get a job. When that agency that's trying to hire them Googles their name, the first thing that will show up is that missing person tweet that you put out. So it's key to delete those once those people are found, and encourage your members that are on social media to not quote tweet it or add their comments to it, just to retweet it and leave it at that. Because that actually happened to me. We had one, it was a bit different. It wasn't missing. It's from 5-6 years ago. We used to do Wanted Wednesdays in my division. And this guy, it was part of it was a misunderstanding. It was an ex-girlfriend. He was charged with some things. He's turned his life around. Those charges were done and dealt with. And when you Googled his name, the first thing that appeared was my tweet. So he actually messaged me and asked to have it deleted. So I deleted it, but the problem is it's still on the Google search. Regardless of what I've done now on my account, you Google his name, it still appears. And you do have that option of reaching out to Google and having them delete it from their search engine. And usually they'll comply and do that for you. And in this case, they did.
Does that work the same then for like Amber Alerts and all of those alerts that people sometimes have automated onto their phones?
If you're retweeting it, right, because Amber Alert has a Twitter account. They have an American one and a Canadian one. So you just want to be careful not to quote tweet those things, because I don't know how they work it if they delete it. But for your agency, depending on where you work, the best practice should be, if that youth is missing and then found, to delete it and delete their photo so it doesn't go onto the Google search engine and it's gone for them. Because, sometimes they don't want that showing up when they go to get a job 5 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, Lori, that's a good point. And even just a good point bringing up using your social media platform for things such as missing persons. I know there's a way more a higher success rate using social media to support missing persons and being able to locate them than not using social media platforms at all. So even just that example was a good one, because I would have forgot about that if you hadn't brought it up.
So at the end of this, I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to reach out to you, either of you or both of you, or whatever combination they want, to get more information. So maybe Lori, starting with you, where's the best place for people to find you and reach out to you if they have more questions?
I'm on social media. I have an account here and there. So no, I'm kidding. I'm on social media. So at the Coffee Cop, several different accounts. You can find me there. That's probably the best way to get hold of me. And I'm sure most people, if they're watching this, there's a very good chance they have social media accounts, hence why they're listening. If not, I do have an email, which ironically is the Coffee Cop 5253@gmail.com. I keep it simple, right? The Coffee Cop all around. So you can also reach me there as well.
Awesome. And Amy?
So for me, I'm at the Yoga Cop on Twitter, Instagram. I am on Facebook, but I'm not using it very much. I'm just there as a presence. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can direct message me on those sites. I do have, I work with a lot of external organizations, as I mentioned. So I do have a website with the International Society of Crime Prevention Practitioners, and that's Boudreau, so ABOUDREAU at iscpp.org. If you have any questions related to anything crime prevention, how to use your social media platform for crime prevention, or wellness, or some of the other things that I do. I guess my last thought would be for everybody to just use your policing platform on the social media platform to create positive social media. Like, you have the opportunity to create a positive social media reputation. So just use that to your advantage. Don't be afraid to use social media. And again, within the perimeters of what your law enforcement agency or organization, because you don't want to, get yourself in trouble, but just make sure that, what you are posting, the content, just keep all the things in mind that we mentioned, and don't be afraid to use it. Ultimately, you want to have some form of training so that you feel confident and comfortable using that platform and creating a presence online, because we do need people who are spreading positivity.
Awesome. That's fantastic. If I could just ask the two of you to hang out for 2 seconds, we'll do a quick AAR after this. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us for this round of the Instructors Roundtable on social media and law enforcement. A question just came up from Dawn, hoping that she can get the replay because she just got here. Absolutely. If you're watching this, it's going to be available on YouTube pretty much right after this live show ends. So please make sure to share this within your agency or people that you think will find benefit from watching this. Of course, the purpose of this is to generate content for you that you can use as reference down the road whenever you need. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you haven't already checked out the ILET Network website, make sure to do so, ilet.network. It's going to give you information about all of the courses we have coming up, all of the events, and you're going to see exactly what we're putting together there. So I'm really excited to bring that to you. So thank you so much for joining us here on the